Great. Well, thank you all so much for joining us this morning in person and virtually. We are so excited to be back in person. I can't even begin to tell you. My name is Kylie Lapira. I'm the CEO of the Melanoma Research Foundation, and I shared last night we had a nice little welcome reception for people who were here early, and I just kind of wanted to set the stage a little bit because the last 2 years have been such a blur for many of us. And I kind of wanted to reflect a little bit back on where we've been and where we are now. So the last time we gathered in person was 2019 in North Carolina. We had over 200 patients and caregivers join our symposium at that event. And the reason we chose North Carolina is that's because that is really where the first cluster of ocular melanoma patients was identified. And it was sort of the epicenter of our initiative to launch a patient-powered registry called Vision, which we'll talk about more later today. So, oh, I'm muted. You all get to hear that one more time. Pretend like it's new. So good morning, everyone. My name is Kylie Lapira, CEO of the Melanoma Research Foundation. It is so wonderful to see you all in person. We have over 50 attendees here in the room with us, and we have about 60 plus virtually from all over the world logging in to view today's session. So thank you all for being a part of this and joining us. I wanted to just take a moment and kind of frame and set the stage for where we've been and where we are today. So to give a little perspective, in 2019, we held our Patient and Caregiver Symposium in North Carolina. And the reason we chose that location was because that is where the first cluster of ocular melanoma patients was identified. And that is really the impetus for the Melanoma Research Foundation's CureOM initiative, starting a patient-powered, patient-reported registry called Vision, which we'll talk about a little later. So fast forward from 2019, it's January of 2020, and the MRF's CureOM initiative initiates the first ever ocular melanoma FDA listing session. So many of you are wondering, what is that? Well, as a rare cancer, the FDA is very interested in accelerating treatment options, but they didn't know too much about ocular melanoma. So we convened a group of patients, caregivers, and physicians to physically go to the FDA in January of 2020 and share with them their patient journey. What it's like from a researcher and clinician's perspective, what it's like from a caregiver's perspective, and what it's like from a patient's perspective. And I had to laugh because that was the first time we actually used Zoom, because we Zoomed in other patients, and there were all these technical issues, and I'm like, oh my gosh, Zoom is so hard. And look where we are today, where it's part of our daily life. And then you fast forward again to May of 2021, where we launched our Vision Registry. The first of its kind, patient-powered, patient-reported registry. We've had over 375 people sign up for this registry and put in their data. Not only their data, but the data of someone that they lost to this disease. And it's been incredible because this data will help move research forward. So excited that we launched that in May. It went international. Sarah and Jackie, who's here, signing people up for the registry, have done incredible work. And again, we'll talk more about that later. Fast forward to this year, the first FDA-approved treatment for metastatic uveal melanoma was approved. So that is incredible progress in 2 years. If you think about the pandemic and how research was stalled and labs were closed, to be able to make that announcement is huge progress. So again, I just wanted to sort of set the stage and level set because again, we haven't been together in so very long. So I'm gonna start off today, and we're gonna hope everything works because technology is so awesome. My clicker is not working, so we're gonna fix that in 1 second. But while we get IT up here, I'm gonna start by just acknowledging a few people in the room. We have a lot of MRF staff here today that are gonna be assisting throughout the sessions, and if I call your name, I just would like you to stand so everyone can see who you are. First, I would like Jackie Kraska, who's our Research and Data Officer. Jackie, can you stand? Jackie is going to be helping people sign up for the registry. We have a table right outside in the lobby. So again, if you have not signed up for our registry, please take a few minutes during the break, meet with Jackie and sign up. The next person I would like to introduce is Kim Watkins. Kim, if you could stand, please. Kim is our Advocacy Officer at the Melanoma Research Foundation. She's brand new to the team, so please join me in welcoming her. Kim is going to be your point person on anything that's related to advocacy in rare disease. Next, I would like Eric Kraus to stand. Eric's also a new member of our team. Eric works on our education team, helping to develop content, webinars, all the great stuff that you see us produce. So please join me in welcoming Eric. And I'm going to have James and Adam both stand. James is our Chief Communications and Marketing Officer, and Adam is our Communications Officer. It's our amazing communications team that's here with us today. And I'll be making some more announcements later, but we have I Get Dilated, which is our prevention awareness campaign, outside the door, and we're going to be doing patient testimonials later. So if you have any questions about that, those are the two gentlemen that you need to see. And then last but not least, Amy Marbaugh, our Senior Education Officer, who orchestrates and oversees all of our educational programming. So that is the MRF team. So if anyone needs anything over the course of the day, please feel free to reach out to any of them. They're wearing name tags. So now I would like to thank our wonderful financial sponsors of this event. Without them, we could not put these on. So I would just like to take a moment and recognize all of our wonderful sponsors for today's program. If you could join me in a round of applause for them. And many of them are here today. They want to connect with patients and caregivers. So again, if you see one of these wonderful people from one of our industry partners, please say hello. Please share your patient journey. That's what they're here for. That's what they want to hear. And I would be very remiss without thanking our wonderful partners at Thomas Jefferson University. I particularly want to thank Dr. Marlena Orloff and Dr. Takami Sato, who I don't see quite yet, but they have been instrumental in putting together this program. The speakers, the content, So I just want to take a minute and again kind of give everyone an overview of the Melanoma Research Foundation. Many of you, this might be your first time hearing about the Melanoma Research Foundation. So I just wanted to share a little bit about who we are. We were founded 26 years ago by a patient. We are a completely independent organization. A young woman by the name of Diana Ashby was dealing with her third recurrence of metastatic melanoma. And at the time, there were no approved treatment options. And out of frustration and out of her willingness to know that the treatments would not benefit her in her lifetime, but knowing that young women should not be dying of metastatic melanoma in their 30s, she forged ahead and started fundraising for melanoma research, and thus formed the Melanoma Research Foundation. We are a national foundation, and our mission is quite simple. Our goal is to accelerate research by educating and advocating for the melanoma community. And I'll talk a little bit about those three mission areas. So funding research, educating patients and caregivers, and advocating. Tripartite mission. And our footprint is large. As you can see, we're based in Washington, D.C., but as I mentioned, we're national. So we have events and programs all over the United States. We're in many communities, whether those programs that are being hosted are by the MRF or by advocates in their own community. And over the course of the day, you'll hear about some events that our amazing advocates are hosting to benefit the MRF's CureOM initiative. So I'm going to touch on our three mission areas, and then I'm going to dive a little bit deeper specifically into the CureOM initiative. So our research area encompasses quite a few areas. We have our peer-reviewed research grants, and to date, we have awarded over $21 million in research grants, and we are announcing this year's grants later this month, so that number is going to go up considerably. We involve advocate reviewers in our grant review process. So that means you, our patients, our caregivers. If you would like to review research grants, I strongly encourage you to do so. Having the patient perspective in the research that we fund is so critical. And I will tell you, time and time again, patients say, oh, I don't know if I'm gonna add anything. And every single grant review period, a researcher changes their score based on feedback from a patient. So it is critical to be involved in that process. We have several scientific initiatives that we work on. CureOM is one. We also host scientific meetings and workshops. We host about 3 a year in very specific areas. CureOM and ocular melanoma is one of those. And we host a breakthrough consortium, which is a group of sites, academic sites from all over the country that work together on major scientific initiatives. Our next pillar that I described is education. We have a very robust educational program. We have about 300,000 unique visitors to our website every single month looking for education, and that education varies. So we have educational materials. All of these are free of charge. We will ship them to your doctor's office. We will ship them to you. We will ship them to a school. These are, again, a wide variety of materials, and I'll talk a little bit more specifically about our ocular melanoma materials in a minute. We host webinars. We host about 2 a month in various topics. We just hosted one in Scanxiety in ocular melanoma, which again is always available on demand on our website that you can view. We have animated melanoma patient videos. These are huge concepts that we take down and distill down to 2 to 3 minute animations. We have patient and caregiver symposiums, like the one you're here today, and our Ask the Experts series. Our advocacy program. So we have 4 focus areas in our advocacy program, and again, I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into the rare disease space. We are focused on research, so getting research for melanoma. That's through the Department of Defense, that's through NCI, and that's through NIH. Every year, our advocates come together and ask their lawmakers to sign on for more funding for melanoma research, and we're very excited that this year, through the CDMRP, rare melanoma is included in that funding, and that's huge. That's $40 million in funding. So a huge step forward. Access, again, access in treatment options, access in clinical trials, educating our advocates, educating them on what the issues are so that they can talk effectively to their lawmakers, and prevention. I've listed 2 initiatives there, which is ban the tan and sunscreen in schools, which you would be surprised because sunscreen is considered an over-the-counter drug and not allowed in many schools in our country. Prevention and awareness campaigns. So we have 4. Specifically, our ocular melanoma campaign is an awareness campaign. We know we cannot prevent ocular melanoma, but we can make people aware about what they need to do to get their eyes dilated and to overall understand eye health. These are our other prevention campaigns: Get Naked, which is our cutaneous campaign, our pediatric melanoma campaign, and our mucosal melanoma campaign. So now I want to talk more specifically about the MRF's CureOM initiative. So CureOM stands for Community United for Research and Education of Ocular Melanoma. It was founded in 2011, so last year we celebrated our 10th year, and it was founded by Dr. Sarah Seelig, who's the director of the program and is on a very well-deserved vacation with her beautiful daughter in Africa right now, which is why she couldn't be here, and her late husband, Dr. Greg Strax. And again, when Greg was diagnosed, there were no options available to him, and Sarah and Greg, as physicians, traveled all over the country, met with every expert they could possibly find, and were still left feeling defeated and hopeless and without options. So they decided, much like Diana Ashby did, to do something about that. They came to the MRF and wanted to found the CureOM initiative because the mission that they saw with CureOM was the same as the MRF: funding research, educating patients and their loved ones, advocating. But where CureOM differs is we have a lot of support. There's a lot of support initiatives that we have developed because of the nature of this disease. We have amazing governance of the CureOM initiative. We have a patient and scientific steering committee. So again, the patient and their voice is really at the center of everything we do, getting their input and their guidance, and a vision steering committee. So again, that is the registry that we'll talk more about a little bit later. So now I'm really pleased to share a video that we put together to really celebrate the CureOM initiative's 10th year. There's a couple of you who are featured in the video that are here today. So I'm going to take a moment and show you a little bit more of what the CureOM initiative is.
When Greg was diagnosed with metastatic disease and we were told he had 6 months to live, we were faced with the hardest time in our lives, and we knew we wanted to do everything we could to save his life. I knew I wanted to do everything I could that was in my power to save the love of my life. And when it became clear that we weren't going to be able to save his life, but we could perhaps extend his life and might have the opportunity to save the lives of other people, that became a real driving force for us. So with a rare disease like uveal melanoma, it can be hard for patients to find each other, and it can be hard for researchers and clinicians to really get a full grasp of what's happening in this disease and really understand the patient experience and patient preferences.
The local support groups are breast cancer support groups or lung cancer support groups, and nobody with the same kind of cancer. And it's not the same. It's not the same because I didn't have treatment options. I didn't have a group of other people to say, well, this is what it's like to navigate life with one eye. I felt very alone. I felt very, that there wasn't anyone around for me to really bounce ideas or what the next step should be, or if I make a misstep, what does that look like? The big moments for me are meeting the other patients and caregivers. Those are huge moments because you walk into the room and you don't have to explain yourself. I don't have to tell them what my journey looks like. I don't have to tell them what it felt like. They just understand.
One of the greatest things about Cure-OM is the ability as a researcher and clinician to have, direct networking and communication with patients.
They give important grounding for researchers, give researchers an opportunity to speak directly to patients and caregivers and hear directly back. And that's an important conversation to have, so that there's a bidirectional flow of information from the community to the bench and back again.
One of my most favorite things is, presenting new data at these patient meetings. It's one thing to present data to your peers, but when you get to present some positive results of a clinical trial or some new and interesting ways that we could treat the cancer to patients, it is really, really powerful.
Once we started noticing that there were a lot of patients diagnosed in a certain geographic area, at the Atlanta conference, Dr. Orloff actually said, we really need a registry.
It was clear to us when we were trying to do some epidemiology work that we were kind of missing important parts of understanding the disease. Where were they living? What were their lifestyles? We were all very excited that we've recently launched the Vision Registry, which is really a tool to help kind of gather a lot of this information so that we can look and hopefully better be able to help patients navigate through this, the treatment journey. Not only will the Vision Registry help researchers, we're also hoping that the Vision Registry acts as a tool to even bring patients together.
The Vision Registry is critically important because it gives an opportunity for patients to be involved in the field. From a researcher's perspective, it's very important because it will provide critical information about groups and cohorts of patients and might lead to insight in terms of what are the initiating factors, especially environmental factors.
So when I first started treating patients with uveal melanoma, there weren't many specific clinical trials for patients with uveal melanoma. Now, when I have conversations with patients who are newly diagnosed, certainly newly diagnosed with advanced disease, the conversation's really complex. There are at any given time 4, 5, 6, 7 potential treatment options. Again, the conversation's getting more complex, but it just goes to show how much more we know about uveal melanoma now and the different treatments that we're trying to explore. Now more than ever, the clinician, so the oncologist who's seeing patients in the clinic, the researcher who's in the lab, and the patients are working together really hand in hand to push this forward. And I think that's going to continue, and I think we're going to see really amazing things over the next 10 years.
Sarah and Greg brought together the researchers and the clinicians for the very first time, and that is big because they're everywhere. They're scattered all over the country, and not one person is going to cure this disease. And I feel like we have gained so much momentum to the point where we're going to find an adjuvant therapy. No longer are patients going to be diagnosed and not have that therapy that stops OM from progressing. We're going to get there.
So being at Curo and patient meetings today is always a little bittersweet for me because Greg's not there. It's also amazing to be able to hug people who have been here since the beginning and are doing wonderfully, and their health is good, and I know they'll be here for years to come. And my hope is that there are more patients like them at every meeting, and that patients are living longer and longer so that there aren't empty chairs at Thanksgiving dinners. And that's why we do this.
When you first get diagnosed, it just feels overwhelming. It's this big mountain in front of you and you don't know how to get to the other side. But then when you look and you see somebody who is on the other side, somebody who made it through year 1, made it through year 2, year 3, year 4, oh gosh, now we've got somebody who made it through year 10. That is hope, and that's what we need. We need to spread hope. We need for people to understand that you can live, you can thrive, you can live alongside OM.
Great, and that video is on our YouTube channel. We're going to be sharing that after the program as well. Sarah touched on research, and I touched on that a little bit earlier as well, and I wanted to really kind of give you more information about specifically what the MRF's Curo Initiative has done in research. So to date, over the last, let's call it 10 and a half years now, again, we're announcing our new grants at the end of this month, they have funded 17 uveal melanoma research grants totaling over $2.1 million. And again, that number is going to increase this year. We offer a host of awards, a Team Science Award, which has researchers from multiple institutions working together and must include a junior investigator. We have established investigator awards. Again, that's for the more senior investigators. Career Development Awards, again, fostering that next generation of clinician researchers. And a new award this year, which is called a Mid-Career Bridge Award. This is for researchers who might have received funding through the government. It's called an RO1, ROI1, RO1. And they might have applied again, but they didn't receive that funding. So they're kind of at a standstill. We're giving researchers who apply bridge funding so that they can continue their research and then apply again. And then our medical student grants. So these are the host of activities that we, again, provide specifically in ocular melanoma research. We also are a convener, and Sarah touched on that in the video. We have hosted now, I believe this is our 12th, global science meeting. So again, we are bringing together researchers, clinicians from all over the globe to talk in terms of multidisciplinary research and collaborations to further the field. And when we first started, there were about 6 people around the table. At our last virtual meeting, we had over 235 attendees from all over the globe. So again, this has grown dramatically, and that's a multidisciplinary team of clinician scientists. So I want to talk a little bit about vision, but again, I'm just going to plug it because we're going to talk very deeply about the Vision Registry. But this is a platform, again, that was launched in May of 2021. And for the patients and caregivers here, again, please see Jackie at the Vision Registry table and sign up. For our virtual attendees, you can visit melanoma.org/vision platform and get registered. So I want to talk a little bit about education again, because this is a big part of what we do. I talked a little bit earlier about the materials. So we have a host of materials that are available for ocular melanoma patients and their loved ones. We have a patient guide, and again, these are free of charge. We can mail them to doctors' offices. We host webinars. I've listed a few there. Our most recent one was Understanding the Clinical Trial Process, which can be quite confusing. As Marlena said in the video, there are many more choices now than there were years ago. All of these are available on demand through the MRF's Education Institute. So if you click on Education Institute, you click on ocular melanoma, you will see all of the on-demand webinars that we have for ocular melanoma. In terms of advocacy, again, rare disease now has been in the spotlight, and our advocacy efforts have increased in that area. I mentioned earlier, through the congressionally directed melanoma research program, we have $40 million allocated specifically for melanoma research. They have added a new category this year, which is huge. It's rare melanomas. That is up to $4 million in funding for rare melanoma research, specifically uveal melanoma, mucosal melanoma, and pediatric melanoma. So this was never called out before in this grant process, so this is really dramatic, especially for the uveal melanoma research community, who's already doing so much good work, for them to have access to this funding. In terms of access for our advocacy, again, treatment, clinical trials, education. What are the issues impacting the rare melanoma community? And again, I would encourage all of you to talk to Kim. If there are issues that you're seeing in terms of barriers to access, barriers to treatment, please talk to Kim, because again, we can use our collective voices to take these issues to our lawmakers. And awareness. We have partnerships with other organizations that are solely focused on rare disease. I just highlighted one there, which is NORD, but we have many partnerships with organizations that focus on rare disease. Our Ocular Melanoma Awareness campaign, and again, we have materials that are outside on the literature table. They were also in the bags that you all received. We focus on 2 months of the year to bring awareness to ocular melanoma. The first is May, during Melanoma Awareness Month and Eye Health Month. Again, encouraging people to get a dilated eye exam. Many people have perfect vision, so they think, why do I need to even go to the eye doctor? My vision is fine. Again, making that a routine for people in terms of their overall wellness. The other is November, and the reason we do it in November is because people with flex savings accounts wait till the very last minute, and they can use that to get a dilated eye exam. So again, it's a way to help our community understand the value of not only getting that yearly wellness, but also taking advantage of their benefits as well. So I want to do a little plug now for our next Patient and Caregiver Symposium, which will be held at Moffitt Cancer Center in Tampa, Florida in January. So I'm sure we'll see a lot more people at that event. But again, it'll be January 27th to 29th. It will also be hybrid. So for people who are unable to travel, they can still participate as well. And again, this is in your program. You can scan that QR code. I also want to share a little information. We have events all over the country, which I mentioned. We have an upcoming event, our New York Gala. We have a CureOM Vision of Hope Award. This year it is being given to Dr. Brian Marr. He's at Columbia. He trains with Dr. Richard Carvajal. Many of you probably know him. I wanted to let you know we are honoring him this year. So if you have friends or family in the New York area and want to support Dr. Marr or just share that information with your friends, we would encourage you to do so. And also another plug for our Miles for Melanoma event happening tomorrow at Franklin Square. We have over 400 people attending. We have raised well over our goal, raising $83,000 plus. Our goal was $70,000, so this community is really coming out strong. So again, for all of you who are coming out to walk tomorrow, thank you. And then we also want you to engage on social media. So again, this is a way that a lot of people are getting their information these days. We have designated CureOM channels, so again, we would encourage you to use them. Tweet about this meeting, share photos on Facebook, get the word out about the resources that the MRF's CureOM initiative has. And then a few reminders for the day before I introduce our first speaker. For our in-person attendees, please, please always use the microphone. We have a stand-up microphone in the room. The virtual attendees will not be able to hear you if you do not use a microphone. So please walk up and use the microphone. Visit our literature table. Again, we have MRF resources, but we also have the resources from our industry partners. They have generously put their resources out as well. Visit the vision table, which I've already shared, again, right outside the door. Tape a testimonial and share your story. Again, if you walk through the turnstiles, we have our I Get Dilated Step and Repeat. We're going to be recording patient testimonials throughout the day. I also would encourage everyone to visit our Celebration of Life station. We are going to have a really special presentation. Again, that's the table right when you walk out the door. Share inspirational messages, and we have a wonderful video that will be looping all day long. And then again, share the highlights on social media. And if you need help, again, throughout the day, please reach out to any one of the staff of the MRF. For our virtual attendees, you can access all of these resources virtually that I mentioned throughout the presentation, specifically the education resources, and I put the link there. For our virtual attendees, if you have a question, please use the Q&A box. We will be taking your questions and doing them live. And then again, we would encourage all of our virtual attendees to also share their insights on social media. So with that, I am going to introduce our first speaker today, Dr. Andrew Chapman. He is the director of the Sidney Kimmel Cancer Center, executive vice president of the oncology services at Jefferson Health. He's also professor of medical oncology and co-director of the Jefferson Senior Adult Oncology Center. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Andrew Chapman.
Okay, so good morning, and on behalf of the Sidney Kimmel Cancer Center, it is my honor to welcome you back to Philadelphia, where the first patient meeting was held many years ago. We're incredibly honored to host this first meeting back in person since 2019, as well as this meeting to commemorate 10 years, the 10-year anniversary of Cure-OM. Jefferson Sidney Kimmel Cancer Center is recognized by the Melanoma Hope Network as one of the leading treatment centers in the country. Offers exceptional knowledge, care, and compassion for patients with advanced melanoma. Each year, we see about 100 new patients with metastatic uveal melanoma, many of whom have traveled from outside the tri-state area. It's important to recognize that we are lucky to have this world-class team composed of scientists and clinicians from Thomas Jefferson University Hospital, from the Sidney Kimmel Cancer Center, and from Wills Eye. With a generous gift from one of our grateful patients, we established the Melanoma Research Institute of Excellence, which we call the MRIE, earlier this year. The MRIE works to expand the depth and breadth of research aligned with Jefferson's clinical strength under the leadership of some of the world's foremost researchers in melanoma who have made seminal discoveries that help push the field forward. And these leaders include, as you know, Dr. Takami Sato, Dr. Marlena Orloff, and Dr. Andrew Chapman. This remarkable team gives us hope. This is evidenced by what you heard and what you know. The FDA approved the first ever treatment for metastatic uveal melanoma, tebentafusp, earlier this year. And this stemmed in part from research and trials that were done here at SKCC. However, there's much more work to be done, more treatments to discover, and research is really vital to moving the needle on uveal melanoma. As one of the few programs in the nation treating uveal melanoma, these insights discovered at Jefferson have the potential to radically shift the standard of care for patients and their families for many years to come. So with that, we are honored again to have you here today for such an important meeting. Thank you. And Kaylee, I'll turn it back to you.
We are going to move into our next session, and I would like to invite two of our steering committee members, Bernadette Boyle and Sam Bursky, to come on up and sit at the table right here. So if you have questions about the steering committee, these are the ladies to ask. We're going to have you right over here. So I'd like to do a little brief introduction and then hand the floor over to them. So Bernadette's husband, Joe, was diagnosed with ocular melanoma in January of 2008 and metastatic disease in 2011. Joe was lost to metastatic uveal melanoma in January 2016, but Bernadette has not slowed down. She has continued to advocate and is a strong force in the ocular melanoma community. Sam is an ocular melanoma survivor who was first treated in August 2011 for uveal melanoma. She underwent enucleation surgery as well as a way to battle this disease. Sam is also a strong advocate, and you'll hear more about her story as well. So I'm going to pass the baton over to them. They're going to share with you a little bit about their involvement in the steering committee, with really about raising awareness and being advocates in the ocular melanoma community. And we can ask questions and engage, and again, find out ways that you can be more involved and be your own best advocate. So with that, I will turn it over to you ladies.
Okay, do you want to start? Sure. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for having me. It is an honor and a privilege to be here because, as Kylie said, it is actually my 11-year cancerversary. And 11 years ago, I would not have thought that I would be here today. So there's hope in that. And for all the new patients, the caregivers, the loved ones out there, just know that you are not alone. This disease can be very isolating, so I hope you understand you're not alone. I'm very excited to be in person because not only is it really, we're going to get really good information today, updates on research and education and those types of things, but to be honest, my favorite part about this symposium is to meet all of you. So you walk into a room and everybody understands you, and that doesn't happen out there. I walk in here and I accidentally knock something over, or I fall over something, or my eye looks a little bit strange. Nobody asks the question because everybody understands that. And that is where our advocacy starts, because in this room, we all understand one another, but out there it's a little bit different. Our cancer doesn't look the same as everybody else's cancer. The rare disease space is not quite the same. And so it's really important for us to advance advance our platform. And so not only within your own community, but within the larger community, within the medical community and the research community, and as Kylie pointed out, with the different government agencies. So the Cure Patient and Caregiver Steering Committee is very special. It's made up of several different people. We have patients with metastatic disease, with primary disease. We have caregivers with younger patients. We have those who have lost loved ones. And we each bring a unique perspective from the community to the organization, which is really important. Over the course of 11 years, Curium has accomplished so many things. And it's really hard. I was sitting back to try to think about all the different things that we've been involved in. And I remember back in the day when we were putting together the symposium, and we didn't have everything. We didn't have all the resources that we have now. So we were calling and different people and, hey, can you volunteer for this? And can you do that? And let's put this together. And so it looked very different. But throughout all the different things that we've planned, we've always had the caregiver and the patient voice at the center, which is super important, making sure that the community is heard, because it is a different cancer. It is not the same, as I said in the video, you don't walk the same walk that a lot of other people go through, and it's important that that patient voice is heard. So some of the things that we have done, the FDA, that was a really fun and important day. And I've got to tell you that the room was packed. We were sitting there and more people kept coming in, and I was like, wow, there's more people that are wanting to hear about this rare disease. We're so tiny, but honestly, there wasn't even a space in there to move. And then not only that, there were people that came in on virtually. So we were able to really discuss what it was like to be an OM patient, what it was like to be an OM caregiver when you're told you have no more options. And everybody in the room looked at us and said, really? What's that like? So, and then later on we hear that we have a new FDA-approved drug. So every part of our advocacy makes a huge impact. Some of the other highlights have been the I Get Dilated campaign. That is a big one. Even though it's an awareness campaign, we know that we can't stop people from getting ocular melanoma. It's really huge because the earlier you get diagnosed, the better it is for you. And not only that, but making other people aware of our rare disease, because how many people know that you can get cancer in your eye? So it's really important for the greater community to be aware that there is this thing called ocular melanoma, and so that we can get more funding, so that we can get more people aware, so that we can get more people participating in all of the things that we need to advance the science. Some of the other things have been the buddy programs. Somebody calls in and says, I'm newly diagnosed, and I don't know what to do. That has been really instrumental, to be able to have somebody else call up and say, hey, I've had enucleation, can you chat to me? And so that has been a really big part, and it's part of the bridging between coming in person to see one another, but also being able to say, hey, I'm picking up the phone, can you chat to me today? I'm having a bad day. So that's also part of some of the things that the steering committee and other people as part of the buddy program have done. Also event planning, we're trying to make sure that there is a QOM team at every Miles for Melanoma event across the country, which is big. And I can remember the very first one I did in DC. There's all this awareness for the other melanomas, and we come trucking along and there's only a few of us, but we're small but mighty, and so you can have your voice heard. If you know of anybody in an area where there isn't a meeting, please just contact one of the Miles people. They are more than willing to do it, or be like Bern and start your own. So I've been part of creating videos, if you've seen. So everyone's like, what do you do all the time? You're always doing these different things. I don't know. It's part of it for me is being able to take control. As I said with the social media thing, is take control of the controllables. So if you've got your story out there, please share your story. Tell people. I just had a conversation with somebody last night, and we were talking about how it's one thing to hear about the research and the science and all of that information about the disease. But really what makes an impact is for people to hear your story. How does this impact your life? What does it look like to walk every day as somebody with this disease? Just from a physical standpoint, from an emotional standpoint, from a psychosocial standpoint. So share your story, share it on social media, use the hashtags. And I will tell you that I have had lots of direct communication with our comms team, and they are fantastic. I'm sure they get tired of me because I'm always, hey, I've got an idea. So they will be more than willing to listen. And they're always asking too, do you have any more information? Do you have anything else you can share with us? Can you make a video? And I'm like, oh my gosh, have you seen my videos? They're not very good. But they really are always looking for content, because the only way that we can advance this is by letting other people know and sharing on our social media platforms. So what I really want you to realize is that we are all part of this effort together. We are small, but we are mighty. Our voices are really, really big and loud, and we need to let everybody know that we are here. When you look at the MRF as an organization, I think a lot of people look at it and go, oh, it's an organization. But really and truly, MRF is made up of patients and caregivers and people who are wanting to advance our voices in this space. So it's so much bigger than you can ever imagine. And, when you're first diagnosed and your world kind of comes crashing down and you think, oh gosh, what is next? The wonderful thing is to be able to take control of that and to be able to have an organization like MRF and QOM and being able to use your voice to be able to bring awareness, to have other people feel that they are not alone, and to be able to fund research. And that is it.
Thank you, Sam. I too am very excited to be here today. Again, as Sam said, hearing the things that have come along since Joe's diagnosis, and just the excitement of just seeing everyone and being together. So I'm very happy to be in person again as well. I would have to start by saying that if you'll just turn your head to the back, to the middle of the room there, Linda O'Brien, raise your hand and wave. You'll hear from her later, but as I sit here and talk about what we're doing, I can't say I, it's a we, because her and I are a team together. So when Joe passed, I could have just stepped away from it, which many people choose to do at times, and that's okay, that's fine, because some people just need to, that's it, they've lived that life and they've gone through it, and now it's time to move away from it. I kind of took a different lead. For me, it drove me to even be more involved than I was, because for myself, I want to see those, the progress that we're making. I want to see those new drugs that are coming out. I have to tell you that when the announcement came out with our FDA-approved drug, I cried, because for me it was exciting. It was an emotional cry, but it was just like this is what we want to see. This is what we want to see happening. So I'm extremely passionate about this. I live, breathe, talk about it. You know, all of my friends know everything about ocular melanoma that there is to know about it because, you know, I just, it's very important to me. It's very important for me to stay involved. So being a part of the steering committee has been an honor for me to be asked to be on it. Being together with, you know, everyone and being able to share ideas and thoughts and everybody bringing another piece to it has been wonderful. So I'm very, very happy to be a part of that. And so just to tell you as quickly as I can, because it's so much to tell, but Linda and I, we had a Miles in Tampa. And we had participated for a few years, several years with it. And then we learned that they were taking the Miles away from our Tampa area. So Linda, who also you'll hear from her later, is with primary disease. And so the two of us said, you know what, we're gonna take this over, we're gonna do it. So we started small. Our race is called Your Next Step is the Cure. And we started in 2017. And we're proud to say that we have already donated somewhere around $46,000 to Cure OM over these last 4 years. This year is our 5th year holding it. Julie, sitting right over there, is actually someone who we started a virtual option this year. So we're in 15 states as well, our race, which we're very excited about. So last year we had 250 participants. We raised $21,000. It's Linda and I. So when you think about taking on a 5K event, permits, insurances, we have road closures because we hold it in an area where I live, in the community where I live. We just moved it there last year, which was a big game changer for us because we got a lot of businesses in the local area as well. Raffle items, vendors, Dr. Peden and Dr. Sooner, who are part of the Retina Associates of Florida. That was actually where Joe had went, and then now Linda is a patient of theirs. And so they come and speak. We've always had someone from MRF attending our event. So we've grown this to something that it's ours, it's our baby, and we love it. You know, we're very, very proud of what we've been able to do. At the end of every event, that's on that Saturday when everybody's gone and we've cleaned everything up, we sit down and we kind of look at each other and say, wow, you know, we did this. So, you know, we're just really, really excited to be a part of it. And like I said, our race is something that's very important to us. You can visit Your Next Step is the Cure on Facebook. Our Instagram page is in the same name. And you can look at, you know, we're posting, we're very active with social media. James has been giving us some pointers with Instagram. We did some of that. Sam actually did an Instagram Live with us. One of the things for Linda and I is that, you know, obviously our community is not ocular melanoma patients, but believe it or not, we have people have come up to us who have either know someone who was just recently diagnosed or, you know, they have a family member. So it really has brought awareness to our community. And we're in Lithia, which is about 45 minutes east of Tampa. Right now, we're as far as like east as Lakeland. We now are in Clearwater. We've got people, our radius is very large, as a number of people that are participating. A lot of people that we don't know, which is awesome. We're really out there now. We're very, very active with our social media. So when we asked Sam to do an Instagram Live, we did it on the understanding that we wanted them to see, like Sam just said, you know, living it, like hearing the real story. And that's what we try to do each time we post something or we have someone come on live, because we want them to understand the behinds of it. Like, why are we doing this? Like, why are we so advocate? Joe is in the forefront of it, but it's more than that too right now. It's all of you that we're hoping, you know, to help. Having Sam come on, you know, live, it was something that gave people understanding and information. Linda can talk about it herself because she herself is a patient. She's an OM warrior. So for me, I'm the caregiver, so I have a different, you know, respect to it. So, but we're very passionate about our event. If you'd like to know more about it, please, you know, talk to us later. We actually brought our QR code. if anybody wanted to scan it and join our virtual group, you're welcome to do that and register. We have our shirts, which we have from Coolabar, and we have a beautiful medal. We'll have a picture of our medal. We have a very sharp medal. It's an eye. It's very cool. But we've grown. We started little. We were very cognizant of the money that we spent each year because we wanted as much as we could to give back to MRF. Everything we raise, every dime goes to MRF CureOM. And so we started little. And each year we added something else, our timing then came, and then, so we've grown, and we have a lot of sponsors as well. So if there's anyone out there that would be interested in sponsoring us too, we can share with you our information. But, we're very proud of our event. It's October 1st. This year we pick the first Saturday of each month. The first Saturday of October, I'm sorry. We kept it the same. Of each month, no, we can't do that. The first Saturday of October, we kept it the same. That way people would kind of put it on their calendar. They just always know it's the first Saturday in October. So I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to meet some people that I'd spoken to on the phone. And Julie, again, thank you for getting us started with our virtual team that she created. I'm just happy to be a part of this, and I will continue to advocate and to hopefully, go further with our research. So thank you so much. Thank you.
And now it is my pleasure to introduce our very first speaker, who's joining us virtually, Dr. Carol Shields. Dr. Shields completed her residency in ophthalmology at Wills Eye Hospital in Philadelphia here in 1987, and subsequently did fellowship training in ocular oncology, oculoplastic surgery, and ophthalmic pathology. Oh my goodness, that's a mouthful. She's currently director of the oncology service at Wills Eye Hospital, professor of ophthalmology at Thomas Jefferson University here in Philadelphia, and she, again, is joining us virtually this morning to provide an Ocular Melanoma 101 session on primary disease. We also wanted to share that Dr. Shields received the MRF's Humanitarian Award from the MRF in 2014 here at our Philadelphia Gala, recognizing her for her tremendous contributions to the ocular melanoma community and the care with which she treats her patients. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Dr. Shields. I will turn it over to you now.
So today I'm going to talk to you about uveal melanoma 2023. We're going to talk about melanoma identification, uveal melanoma genetics, treatment, and prognosis. What's going on this year and what will be going on next year. So let's begin with melanoma identification. As an ocular oncologist, we're trained to detect melanoma at the earliest point. It's easy when a melanoma has a nodule that you can detect it, but we would like to detect it even earlier than this point. And many times we're referred patients who have what looks like a brown spot in the back of the eye, but it's not a melanoma. About a quarter of the patients that are sent to us with possible melanoma don't have melanoma. This person had a hemorrhage under the retina that looked like a melanoma. And this was a doctor who was sent to us who had this brown spot in the back of his left eye. And we looked at several testing modalities, and that was not a melanoma either, even though it looked like a melanoma. That was a birthmark called congenital hypertrophy of the retinal pigment epithelium. So in our practice, we have to sort out the 25% of patients who don't have melanoma from those who have melanoma. Now, our goal is to eradicate melanoma. We're at the front end of this journey that patients who have melanoma, we're at the front end of their journey. We don't like to see patients with large melanoma because we know it's a higher risk for metastatic disease. This one was 17 millimeters in thickness. We prefer to see patients when the melanoma is small because we think we can cure them and prevent metastatic disease. And we've identified risk factors that help us to identify the earliest and smallest uveal melanomas. Here's an example of one. Here we see a picture of the back of the eye and a brown spot. And on this black and white picture, you can see there's a bright white material. That's a sign that that little lesion is active. We call that orange pigment because clinically it looks orange, but on this imaging, it looks bright white. The challenge in our practice is that there's far more common choroidal freckles and nevi than there are melanomas, and we want to sort out what is benign freckle and benign nevus from malignant melanoma. And I show you 4 pictures here, 1, 2, 3, and 4. But if you look at this one here, you can see this one is a little more elevated, and on the ultrasound it has a hollow, a black look on ultrasound, which tells us it's more likely to be a melanoma and that patient needs treatment. The other 3 were classic nevi or freckles and did not require treatment. So we deal with thousands and thousands of patients each year who have choroidal nevus, which is benign, non-cancerous. And in a big study that was done in Australia, they indicated that choroidal nevus was found in almost 7% of the white population. Then we did the same study here in the United States, and we found choroidal nevus was present in 5% of the US adults. And me, even I have a choroidal nevus in one of my eyes. The trick is to identify those choroidal nevus, the plural is nevi, that are at risk for turning into melanoma, because choroidal nevus is the most common spot in the eye that can lead to melanoma. So we push for early detection of melanoma and differentiation of it from the much more common choroidal nevus. Smaller, thinner choroidal melanoma has a significantly better 10-year prognosis. Years ago, we looked at metastatic disease of melanoma. Each millimeter, we said millimeter by millimeter in 8,000 cases. And every millimeter a melanoma gets thicker adds a 5% risk for metastatic disease. So we don't want melanoma to be thick. We want it to be thin. For example, if a melanoma is 0 to 3 millimeters in thickness, the 10-year rate of metastatic disease is only 15%. If it's a medium-sized melanoma, 3 to 8 millimeters in thickness, the rate of metastasis is 30%. And if it's a large melanoma greater than 8 millimeters in thickness, the metastatic rate is 50%. Hence, you see our drive for detection of early lesions. Now let's talk a little bit about nevus, because it's so common. Every day in our practice, Dr. Sarah and I look at 20, 30, sometimes 40 patients with choroidal nevus, making a judgment. Is this lesion going to turn into a melanoma? Now, it's rare for nevus to transform into melanoma. In the real world, it's less than 1%. So I'm not worried about that nevus in my eye. But how often does nevus transform into melanoma in our practice where we see really suspicious lesions? Well, our practice is not the real world because we get all the most suspicious spots sent to us to make a judgment. So we just published in the journal Retina, and we do a ton of research. We put out, on average, 1 big paper every 2 weeks in the medical literature. We are very productive in publication. And in the journal Retina 2019, we published choroidal nevus. How often does it transform into melanoma, and what are the risk factors using multimodal imaging? So in our practice, again, we see the most suspicious lesions. If we follow these 3,800 patients with choroidal nevus, 1% will transform in 1 year, 6% in 5 years, and 14% in 10 years. So most of them don't. 86% don't transform, but 14% transform. And we've identified, using statistics, multivariate analysis, risk factors that predict which nevus is going to turn into melanoma. And there are 6 risk factors. We remember them with this mnemonic. This is what I'm going to teach these doctors here today. To find small ocular melanoma, doing imaging, representing these letters, TFSOM, DIM, and they represent the variables: thickness over 2 millimeters on ultrasound, or fluid on OCT, or S for symptoms of vision loss, or O for orange pigment on autofluorescence, which is a test we do on every patient that we see, or M for melanoma hollow on ultrasound, or DIM for diameter greater than 5 millimeters. And these are really significant risks for choroidal nevus to transform into melanoma. The hazard ratio for thickness over 2 millimeters, that means the rate of transformation is 7.8 times greater than a patient who has thickness under 2 millimeters. Or patients with fluid have a much greater rate, 2.7 times greater rate than those who don't have fluid. Or orange pigment, a 3.2 times greater rate for transformation than those who don't have orange pigment. So I teach these doctors, I'm going to teach them today, the big 3 that we worry about are thickness over 2 millimeters, fluid on OCT, and orange pigment on autofluorescence. Every patient that we see in our office gets an ultrasound to look for thickness. They get an OCT to look for fluid, and they get autofluorescence to look for orange pigment. If a patient has all 3 of these together, it's a 67 times greater risk for transformation into melanoma. This is why if a patient has all 3, we will treat the lesion promptly to prevent growth, to give the patient the best prognosis. Now let's just look at these factors. If a patient has no risk factor, there's only a 1% rate of growth by 5 years. If a patient has any one risk factor, it's an 11% rate of growth. Any 2, on average, a 22% rate of growth. And any 4 risk factors, greater than 50% growth. So generally, if a patient has 3 or 4 or more risk factors, we will treat them promptly. We're not going to wait for that nevus to grow into melanoma. We're going to treat it promptly because it is a melanoma already. And here's an example. Here's a patient who has a pretty flat brown spot in the left eye. And we look at these 6 risk factors. By the way, we write this down on every chart. TFSOM DIM, every patient that we see who has the nevus, and we mark if it's positive or negative. We have a routine, we keep to protocol, and everyone knows to do this. And in this case, we had 4 of 6 risk factors positive. Here you can see the orange pigment on autofluorescence, the hollowness on ultrasound. And this is what an OCT looks like. And this OCT is showing us the lump of the tiny melanoma, and it's making a little pocket of subretinal fluid. This patient needs prompt treatment, not wait and watch. We score all patients, and in this case, the patient was scored with 4 of 6 risk factors with a 47% rate of growth by 5 years. And every combination gives a unique risk. We published this in 2018 in the British Journal of Ophthalmology. It was from our department, but the lead author was Lauren Dalvin. She's currently the chief of ocular oncology at Mayo Clinic. She trained with us. Combination of risk factors predicting choroidal nevus transformation into melanoma. There were like 67 different risk factor combinations, but we found the blue and green bars represent low rate of transformation, whereas the orange and red bars represent high rate of transformation. And we call this a heat map. And look at those patients who have the red bars. That's 70% chance or greater for transformation into melanoma within 5 years. There are several combinations that are highly predictive of growth, and these patients with these combinations would get prompt treatment, increasing risk with the red and orange colors. And this is what we call a heat map, and we now use it in artificial intelligence to score a Nevis, so we know what the score of that Nevis is based on the combination of risk factors, and those with greater than 70% rate are treated promptly. So nowadays, we're very smart when we look at a choroidal nevus or a freckle in the back of the eye. We score it, and if there's 3 or more risk factors, as in this case, it's a melanoma, it's not a nevus, and we treat it promptly. Okay, let's move on to melanoma genetics. How do we get genetics of melanoma? It's inside the eye. How do we get that tissue to do genetics? Well, we do what's called fine needle aspiration biopsy, and we do it at the time we do the treatment. And we send it for either DNA or RNA testing. And this is what we call genetic testing. And if a patient has chromosome 3 or 8 mutation, that's poor prognosis. Or if on RNA, they have class 2, that's poor prognosis. And these patients aren't watched. They are actually entered into adjuvant treatment trials to hopefully reduce the rate of metastatic disease. Now, a very interesting thing happened back in the year 2005. The National Cancer Institute started the Cancer Genome Atlas. Here they studied 33 different types of tumors, including 10 rare cancers, including uveal melanoma. This was a really big project, and they looked at the molecular basis of uveal melanoma, subtypes, and therapeutic targets. This was down at the National Institute of Health. Big deal. This was a really big deal. And they published their first report on uveal melanoma in the journal Cancer Cell in 2018. Again, they looked at 80 cases called the Cancer Genome Atlas Project, many centers from around the United States, including our center in Philadelphia, and they provided a whole spectrum of genetic testing. They called this a multi-platform molecular analysis. And they basically found 4 different types of genetic mutations in uveal melanoma. Group A and Group B, which fall under normal chromosome 3, then Group C and Group D, which falls under monosomy or mutated chromosome 3. And these 4 groups have an increasing risk for metastatic disease. So we took the Cancer Genome Atlas and applied it to 658 eyes with uveal melanoma, and later applied it to over 1,000 eyes with uveal melanoma, looking at, does it really predict outcomes? Does it predict metastatic disease? And the answer is yes. It strongly predicts metastatic disease. So patients with group A and B, low risk melanoma, have low risk for metastasis at 5 years in the red bar and 10 years in the blue bar. And those with group C and D have higher risk for metastatic disease. Group C at 10 years has a 49% rate of metastasis, and group D over 60%. But we don't just sit and watch these patients. These patients are now entered into therapeutic treatments. So in our practice, we use DNA analysis, group A and B, good prognosis. We're thrilled to give that news to the patient. We actually hug the patient or give them a fist bump and tell them they're okay, everything will be all right. And those with group C and D, we enter into systemic trials under the direction of Doctors Sato, Dr. Orloff, and Dr. Sidor, who work together and help our patients with these systemic trials. Let's move on to melanoma treatment. Melanoma treatment. We have many different treatments. We can enucleate the eye, that is, remove the eye if the tumor is large, but most of the time we use forms of radiotherapy, plaque radiotherapy, proton beam, stereotactic, or gamma or cyberknife radiotherapy. We tend to use plaque radiotherapy. Here's a 9mm thick melanoma that was treated with radiotherapy and showed beautiful response. Here's what the plaque looks like with the radiation seeds. The problem with plaque radiotherapy, well, let me say the good news is there's 98% tumor control. It works. The problem is it can cause vision loss. And how can we reduce these complications? Well, we give a medicine called Bevacizumab. We give this medicine now every 4 months for 2 years. And we looked at 1,100, that's over 1,000 cases, consecutive cases, where we gave this medicine as an injection into the eye 3 times a year the first year and 3 times a year the second year. And we found that, yes, it protects vision. At year 1, the Bevacizumab group had on average 20/40 vision versus those who didn't get it, we call them controls, 20/60. At 2 years, Bevacizumab group still had good vision, whereas control group was losing vision down to 2100, which is very blurred vision. And then we stopped the Bevacizumab, but guess what? The protection still lasts. At 3 years, Bevacizumab doing well, control losing more vision. And at 4 years, Bevacizumab had good vision, whereas control group could not even see the vision chart. So Bevacizumab is routine in our practice. All patients are often offered this medicine. In fact, we published that article in JAMA Ophthalmology, which is our leading article. It was published in 2020. And then they wrote a commentary saying this is a major contribution. And now we are going forward with leadership with Dan Martin from the Cleveland Clinic to study this in a prospective way using Bevacizumab to prevent vision loss after radiotherapy. Now I'd like to move on to something really exciting, and that is a new melanoma therapy, ARA nanoparticle therapy. And I mentioned in my disclosures that I serve on the Scientific Advisory Council for ARA Biosciences. We've completed an early phase 1b/2 study. This is an intravitreal injection of a medication that is used for small melanoma to eradicate small melanoma and hopefully protect patients' lives. Here's how we do it. We inject this medication, it's a nanoparticle, into the eye. It's attracted to the melanoma, and it has a little chromophore tail on it. So we shine a laser light into the eye, and it causes immediate necrosis of the tumor. It's an amazing medication. It was FDA approved in March 2017, and there's several centers in US, now in Europe, and Australia set up to do this treatment. The main safety issue is it causes inflammation, but we can control that. It also can cause vision loss, but nothing like what plaque does. Only 4% of patients lose vision, and it controls melanoma in 70% of cases, especially those that are showing growth. So I think in the future, the days of waiting and watching small melanomas will be done. I think in the future, we're going to be using R011 nanoparticle therapy to halt lesions and prevent melanoma. You heard in the early talks in this symposium that we can't prevent melanoma. Well, that's changing. With this medication, I think we'll be able to prevent melanoma. Now we're looking at other ways to inject it, where we inject it into the wall of the eye. The medicine gets to the tumor, we shine the laser light, and this information will be delivered in October 2022 at one of our upcoming meetings. I was asked to give the talk on 17 patients who've been treated with the new way to inject this into the eye. Last, I'll finish on prognosis, and you're going to hear a lot of subsequent talks on melanoma prognosis. It's based on genetics and tumor size. But based on genetics, you've already seen this graph. We have group A and B who are at low risk for metastasis, but group C and D at higher risk, and group C and D are now entered into protocols under the directions of doctors Sato, Orloff, and Sidor, using sunitinib valproic acid or IMTAC. I just want to say one word about IMTAC. I've been following this medication ever since it came out. I don't give this medication. Doctors Sato, Orloff, and Sidor give this medication for metastatic disease. I think it's an absolutely amazing medication. It actually teaches the T cells that all of us have in our bloodstream to fight uveal melanoma. It educates the T cells. Basically, it's a bispecific molecule, and it has two receptors, an HLA-A2 receptor that's attracted to melanoma, then a CD3 receptor that drags in T cells. So it's like a handshake. It brings the T cells to the melanoma, and the T cells gobble up the melanoma, especially metastatic melanoma. This was the first FDA-approved medication, and it was just approved this year for treatment of melanoma, metastatic melanoma. Here's one of our patients that we shared with the team there at Jefferson. This lady had a 9 millimeter thick uveal melanoma in her eye. We treated her, she did well, but she developed liver metastatic disease, those little white spots you see there. She received this medication, IMTAX, and it cleaned up her liver, and at 7 years follow-up, she was still doing well. This medication is called tebentafusp, and tebentafusp, when you're going to see graphs like this, the 2-year follow-up of tebentafusp showed 70% overall survival compared to all other therapies, which had only 20% survival in an early report in 2019, and then a bigger report in recently in 2021, and I underlined Dr. Orloff, who was from our team, showed tebentafusp showed overall survival benefit compared to other treatments. So we call tebentafusp, it's a hard name to pronounce, we call it Tebi. And if you look at Tebi versus other treatments, you're going to see Tebi showed 1 year overall survival of 73% versus 59% with other treatments. But there are side effects that we have to keep in mind, and we'll review those with you today. But Tebi was up against some big name other therapies that are used for skin melanoma, like pembrolizumab and ipilimumab. These are big names for skin melanoma that don't necessarily work with uveal melanoma. But Tebi does provide some control for metastatic uveal melanoma. So, in my opinion, it's effective, but it requires weekly injection, and there are side effects. There is some talk that Tebi might be used to prevent metastatic disease in high-risk patients in Europe. They're going to investigate this, and we're hoping in Philadelphia to explore Tebi as a neoadjuvant to shrink large tumors so that we can save the eye in hopes to shrink tumors down, prevent metastatic disease. There's lots to do with this new medicine, much more to explore, and the trade name now is Kimtrak. And there are other alternatives under investigation for control of uveal melanoma metastasis, and you're going to hear about that today. So in summary, Dr. Sarah Lally and I sit on the front end of uveal melanoma. We make the diagnosis. We sort out the pseudomelanomas. We sort out the nevi and freckles and find the melanoma, treat it and eradicate it. And our goal is to eradicate melanoma by identifying nevi at risk for melanoma. And we do that every day in our practice, using this mnemonic to find small ocular melanoma doing imaging. And we use the Cancer Genome Atlas genetics for identifying patients at high risk for spread. And there's a new medication called RNA nanoparticle that we're currently investigating that might reduce the development of melanoma in the future. And working with our team at Jefferson, and they are an excellent team. We work hand in hand with them with adjuvant therapy for patients at high risk. So I'd like to thank you for allowing me to share my screen from Chicago and give you a capsule summary of uveal melanoma, what's going on in 2022 and 2023. And I'd like to thank my co-worker, Dr. Sarah Lally, and the team at Jefferson, Dr. Sato, Dr. Orloff, and Dr. Cedar for all their help over the many years we've been working together. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Shields. Wonderful presentation, and we would like to open the floor to some questions. Dr. Shields, anything to say about patients without biopsies?
Sure. Ideally, it's nice to have a biopsy to get DNA or RNA analysis, but if you don't have a biopsy, we can use tumor size to predict outcomes. So in my presentation, we discussed tumor thickness really does matter. Genetics are more important and more predictive, but tumor thickness matters. So if you have a melanoma that was treated that was 0 to 3 millimeters in thickness, odds are it's not going to metastasize. Whereas those that are 3 to 8 millimeters in thickness, it's about a 25% rate or 30%. And those that are greater than 8 millimeters in thickness, it's a higher rate. And those are the patients we really need to have on some sort of adjuvant therapy.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Shields. We do have an active virtual questions coming in rapid fire here. So again, a lot of thanks to you from our virtual attendees. One question here is Oro 011 similar to DPT?
Yeah, they got that right.
Okay.
So it's PDT.
Okay.
I thought in the chat it says DPT, but
Okay.
yes, ARA is similar but dissimilar to PDT. Standard PDT uses a medicine called verteporfin, and it's not attracted to melanoma. It just goes where you have blood vessels, and it's not as precise a medication as ARA. ARA is attracted to melanoma or any cancer in the eye. And ARA goes right to that cancer, and it has a little tail that when we shine laser light on it, it takes that laser light and enhances it in the tumor, causing necrosis. So it's a little bit like PDT, but a lot different.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. We have a couple more questions, again, from our virtual attendees. What about PRAM versus PRAM positive?
Yeah, what about PRAME negative versus PRAME positive? And that's also another very good question. Patients with PRAME positive have a slightly increased risk for metastatic disease versus those with PRAME negative. And that can also be used in the genetic testing panel to help grade the risk for metastatic disease.
Great. Just a couple more questions here. One of the virtual attendees said, I recently saw that you presented a paper on actual versus statistical results. Can you talk about that? And I don't know what paper, so maybe we can, because I know you present a lot of papers, so maybe we can ask them to clarify unless you know what they're referring to there.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what paper there, I might have written a summary. Oh, maybe I wrote a commentary on a paper that was published on actual versus predicted results, and that was a paper that is coming out. It wasn't yet published.
Okay, thank you.
Somebody here wrote a question about liquid biopsy.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lenny did. Yes, we do liquid biopsy for other cancers, including retinoblastoma, which is an eye cancer, and we're studying liquid biopsy for uveal melanoma. What is liquid biopsy? Well, liquid biopsy is when you take a biopsy of liquid tissues, like the jelly in the eye, or the front liquid, we call that the aqueous of the eye, or even the bloodstream, to see if we can find any melanoma genetic mutations in the bloodstream. This is the future. This is what we're going to be doing. We're going to be using liquid biopsy to diagnose a patient with melanoma. You know, we're going to see a spot in the back of the eye and we're going to say, I wonder if this is a melanoma, and we'll take an aqueous biopsy to see if it carries any mutations of melanoma. But it's really in its infancy right now. But I suspect within 5 years, it's going to be very mature and we're going to be using this. So we've been working with Ann Balcock at NYU, Dr. Sarah and I send specimens to her, and she does the liquid biopsy up there.
Wow, that's so exciting. All right, we are going to take a couple more questions real quick for you, Dr. Shields, and then let you get back to your students in Chicago. Second to last question, have you seen any evidence that suggests that thickness relates to oxygen deprivation, and if hypoxia accelerates metastatic ability?
That's a very interesting and curious question. The best way for us to look at blood flow, i.e. hypoxia, decreased blood flow, is with fluorescent angiography. And it's a test that we do on all patients when we see them. And we really haven't correlated. We've looked at fluorescein, but it hasn't been correlated to patients' outcome. So we don't know the answer to that question, but it's a good question and it would be a good one to investigate.
Wonderful, thank you. Last question for you, Dr. Shields. How likely will you be to get genetic information from a tumor that has already been treated with brachytherapy plaque and is biopsied a second time?
Sure, that's a good question, and that's already been studied and published. I think Tim Murray from Miami has published on this. If you do brachytherapy, that induces additional mutations in the tumor as it's causing the tumor to regress. And it's not really reliable for predicting metastatic disease. So we prefer the biopsy to be done before brachytherapy.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I'm sure you can see all the accolades from all of our virtual viewers thanking you so much for a wonderful presentation and answering all these questions. With that, let's give Dr. Shields another round of applause for a fantastic presentation. All right, so with that, I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Sarah Lally, who is going to talk to us on post-primary treatment. Dr. Lally is a board-certified ophthalmologist here with the Ocular Oncology Services at Wills Eye Hospital. She is an assistant professor at Thomas Jefferson University and is active with professional societies, including the American Academy of Ophthalmology and International Society of Ocular Oncology. Dr. Lally's clinical interests include conjunctival and eyelid tumors. She has developed innovative new surgical techniques to treat cancer in the region near the eye and provide preservation of sight. Dr. Lally works in collaboration with other departments to provide best care for patients with orbital tumors, particularly those that have invaded the sinus or brain. Dr. Lally also manages babies and young children with serious eye diseases and cancers. And again, you can view all of our full speaker bios in the program. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Lally. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Sarah Lally from the Oncology Service at Wills Eye Hospital, and like Dr. Shields says, we work together in treating melanoma. For all you Wordle fans out there, my topic today is after the plaque. So it's kind of a whirlwind by the time you get to us. We're doing treatment, we're sending you back home, and you come for your follow-up visit, and we say, oh, you're going to get an injection today, or you're going to get a laser today. So today I'm going to try to uncover the black box and let you know why we do what we do. A lot of the research I'm going to present is from our service. Just so you know, others have published on this topic also. However, this is why the Wills Eye Oncology Service has our protocols and how we make decisions on how we're going to treat. I have no financial interest to disclose. So we know we can kill tumors. Like Dr. Shields says, we have a 98% control rate. But it's after the plaque and after treatment that we want our cake and we want to eat it too. We want to preserve vision, and really there's a long history of poor visual prognosis after plaque brachytherapy. Sorry, my text is a little, I had to convert to PowerPoint. So first I'm going to start just with the anatomy of the eye. Carol did a good job about how we identify melanoma inside the eye and the different imaging studies that we use. But when you get diagnosed with uveal melanoma, there's 3 parts of the eye that are included. The iris in the front part of the eye, the ciliary body, which sits just behind the iris, and the choroid. When we talk about radiation side effects, it can affect the sclera, the cornea, the clear window, the front part of the eye, the lens, cataracts can form, the retina, we get radiation retinopathy, and the optic nerve, which is radiation papillopathy. I'm also going to say the vitreous is like air in this room, the jelly inside the eye. So when we do injections, we are injecting into the vitreous. This is what gives you floaters in your vision. So when we look at an anatomic eye then, the sclera is the white part of the eye, the conjunctiva is the clear skin over the eye, the iris is the blue part, the pupil the black, and the lens sits just behind the pupil. When we look inside the eye, the macula, so you'll hear us talking about preserving vision. Well, your best vision comes from the macular area, which is right in the center. And the center part, the fovea, gives you the most crisp, pristine vision that you have. And then the optic nerve, all the information from inside the eye travels down the nerve to your brain to give you your vision. The retinal vessels, so retina I always say is like wallpaper on the wall. The blood flow comes through the optic nerve to supply the retina. And the choroid is deep to the retina. So you can kind of see in this blonde fundus choroidal vessels, which are, I say, more like yarn than the thread of the retina vessels. In the 1990s, the Collaborative Ocular Melanoma study looked at removing eyes versus doing plaque radiation. And what they found was that there was no difference in life prognosis if you had your eye removed or not. So radiation really became the mainstay of treatment. And with the shift of saving eyes then, preserving vision became more important. So when you think about it, when I went over the anatomy, when we put a plaque on the eye, if you have an iris melanoma, well, we're going to irradiate the front part of your eye. We're going to affect your cornea. The lens is definitely going to get a cataract. And as we move backward, you still can have involvement of the cornea and lens, but it's all based on thickness also. And then once you get more towards the center of vision, you can lose vision in the center, and the optic nerve can be affected by the radiation. Tissue can only take so much radiation. And when you look, the cornea, like I said, the clear window, can get a dry eye. The window can become foggy at around 30 to 50 gray. The conjunctiva, that's the clear skin, and the sclera, the white part of the eye, so you can get a red eye, or even it can, as Dr. Shields talked about before, scleral necrosis, that happens about 55 to 70 gray. The cataract does not take very much radiation to develop radiation cataracts. And the retina, whether it be in the periphery of the retina or in the center of vision, is also about 35 to 50. Optic nerve can take about 55. So overall, between 30 to 55, when you look at the eye, is the total dose of radiation that the eye can really tolerate. When we treat a melanoma, melanoma is irradiated to the apex of the tumor of 70 gray. So we're giving more radiation to the tip of the tumor. In order to get that much radiation to the top of the tumor, the base is going to be much higher. And so this is really where you start to get the side effects of radiation in the eye. I'm just going to show you this patient presented to our office, which this tumor in the back of her left eye, you can see the blood over top of it. When you come to our office, you know, we bring out our pencils, our paper, we start drawing, you get your ultrasound done. We do measures on thickness and base, and we come up with the size of the tumor for the construction of the plaque. You will always hear in our room, so many millimeters to the fovea, so many millimeters to the optic nerve. So we're kind of documenting where everything is located. And then we send our information over to the Jefferson team, and we're very lucky to be working with them for many, many years. They custom design our plaques, so they will try to minimize radiation to critical structures inside the eye. You can see that this patient then they take their drawing, they put it in their computer system, and they come up with the radiation fields and how many seeds they're going to put on the plaque. And they also look at the dose. So in order to get a dose of about 70 gray, well, the lens right here on this patient is getting 35, optic disc 44, center of vision, the fovea is getting 86 gray. And in this patient, the dose to the sclera, so to get to an almost 11 millimeter thick tumor, the sclera is going to get 260 gray. So you can kind of see how it kind of compounds within the eye itself. And this is what happens to the sclera. This is called scleral necrosis, where people get kind of this darker spot on the surface of the eye. It can expand to about 60% of the size of the original plaque. So it can increase over time. This is not recurrence, which we always get sent back patients because people are concerned. This is just the white part of the eye is a little thin there. We used to go in and kind of put a patch graft over top because we thought the eye of the wall was thin, but actually we have found over time that is not the case. We just generally will recommend lubricating the eye really well and no boxing or getting punched in the eye from this standpoint. But it probably happens more often than not. You see it more frequently, though, when it's when the plaque or the tumor is in the front of the eye than posteriorly, because you can't see that area. So when radiation affects the optic nerve, it's called radiation papillopathy. When it affects the center of vision, radiation maculopathy. And when it's in the periphery, that's radiation retinopathy. And most patients do have combinations of all three parts of the eye. So the treatment of radiation is quite complicated and challenging. Initially, so before we had medications that we could inject into the eye, we kind of based a lot of what we did on retina and using retinal lasers. Outcomes were poor with vision, though. And then there was a shift to intravitreal injections and injecting a medicine into the eye. The anti-VEGF drugs and also steroids get injected into the eye. And you know, the thought is to try to prevent treatment now, do more preventative treatment by doing these injections. And Carol talked a little bit about that. I'm going to go over that also. So the retina lasers were used before we had OCT, before we had these injections, like I said, and they used different types of laser, and it really failed to maintain visual improvement. Dr. Shields in the late 1990s looked at this, and they would do focal laser. So people would get swelling in the retina right in the center. They'd do laser. It would improve the vision for a period of time, but it wasn't sustainable by 2 years out. So we're starting to get into this 2-year period, and you're going to see kind of how we've come up with, how we dose our intravitreal medicines and when we make decisions. So the long-term effects of plaque radiation was looked at initially in 2000, and what we found was 70% of people have a decrease in their vision by 10 years out. Those that have smaller tumors and not located near the macular area and the optic nerve, well, of course, their vision's going to be better. So you need less radiation to get to the tip of it. Initially, intravitreal steroids had been looked at, and what we found was that, yes, it can help with vision, but it is kind of a Band-Aid to the process. The problem with steroids are they cause cataract. Cataract can always be removed, though, and in a portion of patients, it can cause the pressure to go up in the eye. So you have to watch for what we call steroid response, having high pressure, which may mean to be on medicines to help from this standpoint. The nice thing about steroids are, though, it lasts longer than your typical anti-VEGF medicines. So it can last for, 4 or 6 months within the eye. Then OCT came around. So Carol started showing all of our imaging that we used. She was talking about it being over top of the tumor in the eye. We're looking at it right in the center of vision. And what we found was that the OCT changes happen early, even if people aren't perceiving it in their vision, and they're very common. And starting around 4 months out, so 4 months, that's why we see you back at 4 months and we start injecting you, we will start to see these side effects. The mean onset, though, is around 12 months. And that we used to do steroid injection around the eye, and we found that, so you're not getting the cataract, you have less chance of the glaucoma, and there was a benefit. Really, we were doing this before the anti-VEGF medicines came out, and it did help to improve vision. So now I'm going to talk about VEGF. So VEGF is short for vascular endothelial growth factor. It's needed to grow blood vessels into tumor cells. So tumors are going to make VEGF because they want a bigger blood supply. And so it is known that melanoma patients have a high VEGF drive in their eye. And then we're going to irradiate your eye. And guess what? We're going to try to kill that blood vessel supply. And guess what? Your VEGF drive is going to get even higher. And so these medicines can help stop the blood vessel growth. There's different medicines that are out there. The brand names are Avastin, Eylea, Lucentis. And we use Avastin on our service because it's the cheaper of the medicines. And Carol brought up this paper earlier in her talk on how we do every 4 months for the first 2 years, and we found that people had better visual acuity afterwards. So this is really how we started on the track of every 4 months for the first 2 years after plaque radiation, you're going to get an injection. They looked at it 4 years later, and what they found was those patients still continued to have better vision. And so this really kind of sealed the deal from our standpoint on how we do these protocols. There's other medicines that you will see us use in our clinic, the Eylea. So for those patients that aren't responsive to Avastin, sometimes we'll switch over to Eylea to see if we get a better response. Eylea isn't covered by all insurances and tends to be quite expensive. So sometimes we're able to use it and sometimes not. Also, if you're on this 4-month protocol and you develop swelling in your retina, well, guess what? We're kicking you over into a different protocol where you're going to get Avastin every month for 4 months. We're going to try, I always say, to bombard it, quench the fire, and keep it out. And we have seen that this does help with preserving vision from this standpoint. We've also tried kind of doubling the dose of Avastin in the eye, for which didn't make much difference. So now we kind of do the standard dose of 1.25 milligrams when we do it. So laser. All right, so we were looking back in the early 2010s at doing what we call sector laser photocoagulation. This type of laser is done all the time in diabetics. Diabetics, I always say, the sugar clogs the blood vessels in the eye sends out the signal, I need more blood, that VEGF drive, and can make new leaky vessels that bleed and cause more problems than good. They get a laser kind of around the back of their eye to help maintain better blood flow to the center of the vision. Plaque brachytherapy, radiation side effects are similar to diabetes in that not that the sugar is clogging the vessels, but the radiation is scarring the vessels. So it's kind of all on the same kind of ischemic realm that's out there. And so we found that by doing these sector lasers around the tumor, we were able to preserve vision longer also. So that's really how we started thinking, you know what, you're going to get injections, you're going to get lasers. And sometimes we would do even more laser. So I'm going to present a couple cases now and just let you see kind of how we make our decision about what we're going to do. So this patient has radiation. So these little white spots around the nerve, this is radiation papillopathy at its earliest stages. And so probably the vision hasn't decreased. We're going to say when the nerve gets affected, it's felt to be more inflammatory. You know what? We're going to give you a subtenon's Kenalog injection. We're going to inject steroid around the eye. It's less invasive and it helps to quiet this down and help from this standpoint. This patient has had a nice response to plaque brachytherapy. Overall looks pretty good. You don't really see much going on, but we get an OCT and you can really see the swelling in the retina. On the right eye, OD is right eye, OS is left eye, the swelling that's there. So you know what? You were getting Avastin every 4 months. We're going to make you get it every month now, and we're going to try to get that to go away and get better vision for you. This patient has a well-treated scar, but guess what? That nerve, the other nerves look kind of pink. This is white. You're seeing a little bit of redness there towards the center of vision. That's giving us some radiation side effects in the center of the vision. What are we going to do? Well, we can see on OCT here there's thickening and macular edema. We're going to put some laser in. So the laser will help from the optic nerve standpoint maintain better blood flow, and then afterwards we're able to get the macula looking better. The vision may not go back to what it was prior to that, but it's improving people's vision. This patient had a tumor inferiorly here, was treated with plaque brachytherapy. This is a thick tumor. We know this radiation is really going to start affecting the eye. So as soon as we can, guess what? We're going to put our laser in to help maintain better blood flow, which is what kind of that atrophy in the yellow part. You can see how nicely the tumor shrunk down below. You can see the difference in the retina vessels up above versus down below. It's much thinner that's there. And again, has pretty good looking OCT with minimal edema in the retina. So this patient is a different type of photograph, so you know this patient was treated years ago. This is called a montage photo, so they would take pictures and make you look in different directions, and the computer program would put it together. The lesion's near the nerve, so we're going to affect the nerve and the center of vision with doing our plaque brachytherapy, which she did pretty well for a number of years. She got that little sector PRP in time. However, years later then, we start to see the nerve getting affected. So even though I said, you know, around a year later, we're starting to see the side effects, they can be delayed and happen even later. Well, you know what? We might want to give a little subtenon's Kenalog, comes back getting even worse. Guess what? You're going to get an injection of steroid into your eye now because I want to quelch out that fire, and steroid will do the best job from that standpoint. Comes back, actually you can see a little bit of the nerve that's there, but you know, we know there's a VEGF drive in this eye. So I'm going to start giving you Avastin also now. The steroid's going to last for more months than Avastin does. We've already done our steroids. Now we're going to do our Avastin every month to try to lessen the hemorrhage in the eye, because ultimately this patient needs more laser done to the eye to maintain better blood flow. This patient had this tiny, smaller lesion nasal to the optic nerve in the right eye, treated with plaque. You know what? We're starting to see a little bit of those side effects inside the eye, so you know what? We're going to want to do treatment. We'll give you a subtenon's Kenalog, like I said before. We're going to do some laser, too, because I know once that nerve gets affected, the vision can really drop. And we do a little sector PRP in our office. The PRP can be kind of uncomfortable, though. So lots of times we can't put that many shots in. More laser can be done and take you back to the OR. So now we're taking people back to the OR. Everyone's like, why am I going to the OR now? Well, we're taking people back to the OR so we can get a nice laser in that well treats the area. And then even without treatment, you can see kind of all those cotton wool spots and the hemorrhages have definitely decreased. And this has only been like a month after the laser. One thing is also, I'm just going to touch on the topic, lipid exudation. This is very hard to treat. That yellow band around the tumor, we'll do steroids for lipid exudation. But lots of times once the lipid happens, it's really hard to get rid of, and we'll recommend probably no treatment at that time. So why do we do all this? Well, this patient had this tumor inferiorly here, did well for a number of years, but then developed blood in the front part of her eye, hyphema, abnormal blood vessels, that VEGF drive causes the pressure to go up. The eye can become painful, the cornea gets affected. And so eventually patients have to go to enucleation, having the eye removed because of the side effects of radiation, not because of the tumor. So in summary, radiation side effects can be devastating to the vision. Our current hope is to delay or prevent these side effects. We use a combination of lasers and injection. We're hoping for a longer acting medicine to come out there. And like Dr. Shields said in her talk, there's going to be a multi-center trial going on with the DRCR to kind of pan all of this out. So thank you for your time this morning, and if you have any questions.
First question, are steroid injections as effective as Avastin in treating radiation retinopathy?
So steroids end up being more potent. There's more side effects with the steroid injection than there is with Avastin. So that's why generally now before we had Avastin, we were doing steroid. But why we start with Avastin, because there's less side effects with cataract and the pressure going up. With Avastin versus steroids. And when I say Avastin, I'm kind of including all these kind of VEGF drives, VEGF drugs from that standpoint. I hope I kind of informed you a little bit more about why we do what we do and how we make our decisions. Thank you.
So hi everyone, good morning. My name is Reno Cedar. I'm one of the medical oncologists at Jefferson, and so I'll be talking to you about surveillance and adjuvant therapy today. And so I have no disclosures. And so starting with surveillance, what is surveillance? So cancer surveillance is ongoing monitoring for recurrence after your primary eye tumor is treated. And there's no real consensus within the ophthalmologic or oncologic community regarding surveillance of uveal melanoma patients. And what do I mean by that? And so the specifics of how frequently we should be monitoring patients after their eye treatment, which imaging modality, and how long we should really be following these patients, that there's no consensus. There are several guidelines out there, and they're all based on the risk factors, which I'll talk about. I will mention imaging modality does matter. I know there's abdominal ultrasound, there's CT, there's MRI, there's PET scan. At Jefferson here specifically, we do recommend MRIs of the abdomen with a specific contrast called EAVIST. And we have noticed that we are picking up tumors that you may not see in other imaging modalities. And so this is a CT scan that you see on your left of your screen. It looks nice and clean of the liver. But then when you look at an MRI, you do see a couple different spots. And so MRI does pick up things that aren't seen on CT, as well as PET scans. In skin melanoma, the skin melanoma tumors often are active, FDG avid on PET scan, but not all eye melanoma tumors are. And they also don't have the granularity of the liver as an MRI may have. And so when we talk about surveillance and how often we may surveil you and how long, we talk about, it all takes into account the risk factors in uveal melanoma. So I think Dr. Shields may have covered some of this, but the American Joint Committee on Cancer has some guidelines on how to stage your tumor based on T-stage, and that is based on thickness, ciliary body involvement, extraocular extension, and your stage from T1 to T4. T1 being the earlier stages. And then we look at DNA mutations. EEI, F1AX, SF3B1, BAP1, these are some mutations that we may see commonly in uveal melanoma, with EEI, F1AX being kind of a more good DNA mutation to have, less likely to recur, and then you have, on the other spectrum, BAP1, more likely to recur. We also look at chromosomal abnormalities in eye melanoma. We specifically look at chromosome 3, 6, and 8, which I think Dr. Shields may have covered, but we think of chromosome 3 as when you think of a car. If a tumor is a car, then the chromosome 3 is part of your brake. And so if you're missing, so you have one chromosome from your dad, one chromosome for your mom. If you're missing part of your chromosome, or monosomy 3, you're missing part of the brake of the car. And so the tumor can go a little faster. And so chromosome 6, generally if you have an extra 6, that's a good thing. And then 8Q specifically, if you have an extra 8, you're more likely to recur. And so 8 you can think of as the accelerator of the CAR. If you have an extra 8, the tumor can accelerate a little bit more. And then finally, the gene expression profile can categorize you into class 1A, 1B, and 2, and then PRAME, which was mentioned. And so this is one of the guidelines. This is one organization, the National Comprehensive Cancer Network, that has put out guidelines on how they categorize their eye melanomas into low risk, medium, and high risk. And as you can see, these are all the risk factors that we talked about. And so based on these risk factors, they recommend kind of how often to image, although they keep it pretty vague because, again, there's no real consensus on how often they should really get scanned. In Jefferson, we typically, for low risk to medium risk patients, we recommend MRIs of the abdomen every 6 months initially, and chest imaging once a year, and then that gets spread out. For high risk patients, we typically recommend MRI abdomens every 3 months initially, and chest imaging every 6 months. Moving on to adjuvant therapy. What is adjuvant therapy? So this is therapy given after your primary eye treatment is treated to lower the risk that your cancer will come back. And so I just talked about the surveillance guidelines, how maybe we can monitor for recurrence, but this is what kind of treatments can we give you to try to reduce the risk of it coming back. And there's different types of adjuvant therapy, and in a way this is secondary prevention. So we don't have a way to prevent eye tumors from forming, but perhaps with adjuvant therapy, there's a way to prevent cancers from coming back, and that's secondary prevention. How are adjuvant therapies chosen? So oftentimes a drug that we've had success in the metastatic setting is brought to the adjuvant setting, but not always. And we like to study adjuvant therapies, ideally in a randomized trial, to see if there's a true benefit in reducing the recurrence. It is a little bit difficult and harder to prove the efficacy of an adjuvant therapy because we're not looking for how well the tumors are shrinking. The tumors are gone. We have to follow for when it comes back. And so sometimes it takes a longer time, a longer follow-up, and especially in a rare tumor, it's a little bit harder to do a randomized trial. And then aside from choosing the right drug, choosing the right high-risk population, because we don't necessarily need to give adjuvant therapy for everyone. That would be not ideal, and so we need to figure out who exactly needs adjuvant therapy, which high-risk population needs it. Currently, there are no approved standard of care options for adjuvant treatment for uveal melanoma. There are several therapies approved for cutaneous melanoma, but nothing in the adjuvant setting for uveal melanoma. The standard of care is surveillance based on your risk factors, which I just discussed. But there have been several clinical trials in eye melanoma looking at different adjuvant therapy options, and there are still some ongoing or starting up. And so these are the ones that I'll discuss today. And before I go in, I just want to talk about clinical trials in general, because you'll hear a lot about them today. And so clinical trials, when you think about them, these are some of the things that you should take note. So phase of the clinical trial. So there's phase 1, 2, 3, and 4. Phase 1 is the earliest, where they're still studying the drug in humans to make sure that it's safe. And then they move on to phase 2, where they have a small population of patients where they test it for efficacy. And then if it's effective in phase 2, they move it on to phase 3, where it's a larger population of patients, really to prove the safety and efficacy of the drug. And stage 4, if it's once it's approved. And then single arm versus randomized, is it a trial that just has the drug, you're just getting the drug, or is it a trial where you're going to be randomized to different arms? Is it open in just one institution versus multiple? And is it open label? Does the patient and the provider know which drug you're getting, or is it blinded? And then what is the control arm? And then finally, what is the primary objective? What is the goal of the study? Is it safety? Is it response? Is it overall survival, progression-free survival? So those are all the things that you want to consider when we're talking about clinical trials. So starting with Adjuvant Epilimumab. So this was a phase 1/2 study out of MD Anderson in high-risk eye melanoma patients. So high risk for them was defined as either class 2 tumor or monosomy 3 and apical thickness of greater than 8. They started out with Epilimumab 3 mg per kg for every 3 weeks times 4, and then maintenance. When they enrolled 3 patients and it seemed to be tolerable, then they opened up the 10 milligrams per kilogram cohort. So unfortunately, the goal was to enroll 89 patients on this study, but it was stopped at 10 patients due to issues with funding. And so we can't, even though there's some results that I have on the slide, we can't really comment on really how effective it was because it was only 10 patients out of 89 that they were supposed to enroll. And so that you can see that at 36 months follow-up, about 80% of the patients had no evidence of disease compared to a historical control, so patients who historically didn't get anything. And then now there's a trial that looks at adjuvant epilimumab and nivolumab combined. So this is a phase 2 study open at about 6 different sites. They are looking at high-risk tumors, which they defined it as diameter of at least 12 millimeters plus, either class 2 or greater than 50% risk, 3-year risk by Impact Genetics, which is another company, or monosomy 3 with apical tumor height greater than 8. And the treatment details, as you can see below, they get nivolumab every 2 weeks and ipilimumab every 6 weeks for a max dose, as you can see. And so this was sent by Dr. Suthi Rapisawan at Georgetown, but he told me that they are currently fully accrued on this trial. They have been following patients for 23 months. They don't have any results to share right now yet, but they are hoping to open an additional cohort with relatlimab and nivolumab, which is a new FDA-approved immunotherapy combination. They want to open it, but they're still waiting on funding, so it is not open yet. Next, I'm going to talk about adjuvant sunitinib and valproic acid. So this is a study that's open here. It's a randomized phase 2 study looking at those 2 drugs based on for high-risk patients. And for the high-risk patients, it's either monosomy 3 and 8q amplification or class 2 tumors. And there's been 3 different cohorts. So cohort 1 was opened first in 2015, and we were looking at sunitinib or valproic acid for 6 months. That has finished enrolling, and we have our final analysis for that. And cohort 2, opened 2018, it's sunitinib for 12 months. That has finished enrolling. We're waiting on longer follow-up. And cohort 3 opened in 2020. This was sunitinib and valproic acid for 12 months. Again, this is finished enrolling, but we're waiting on follow-up. So why are we looking at sunitinib? So sunitinib or Sutent is a drug approved in some other tumors like renal cell cancer, but it's a multi-targeted tyrosine kinase inhibitor that inhibits several receptors, including KIT. And we've seen that c-KIT is expressed in as many as 75% of metastatic uveal melanoma. We did do a study of 20 patients with metastatic uveal melanoma and treated with Sutent. We saw 1 partial response and 13 stable diseases for an overall clinical benefit rate of 70%. So then we started to look at it in the adjuvant setting. And so we did a retrospective analysis, so not a controlled trial or randomized trial, just looking back at patients who had gotten it and compared it with our historical controls. And at the 5-year mark, the overall survival in the sunitinib arm was 86.4% versus 55% in our historical control. And this is the graph from that. And so again, I have to emphasize this is a retrospective analysis, not a controlled trial. And the rationale to using valproic acid, you may have heard of valproic acid or Depakote. It's a mood-stabilizing drug. But we also know that it's a histone deacetylase inhibitor or an HDAC inhibitor. And we know that HDAC inhibitors in eye melanoma can induce morphologic differentiation, G1 cell cycle arrest, and shift essentially a class 2 tumor to a class 1 tumor. And so this is the schema for cohort 1. So essentially patients either got sunitinib 25 milligrams daily for 6 months, or they got valproic acid 750 milligrams for 6 months, and then they've been followed. The primary objective for this cohort, or the goal of this cohort, was to improve the 2-year overall survival from a historical control of 70%, improve it to 85%. And so again, this is finished enrolling. There were a total of 90 patients enrolled on the study, 45 in the Sutent arm, 43 in the valproic acid arm. And you can see that about 9 patients in the Sutent arm didn't complete 6 months, and 4 of the VPA arm did not complete the 6 months based on either toxicity or progression. The rest did complete all 6 months, and they've been followed. And so this is the overall survival curve. I wish maybe I can move this a little bit. So as you can see, the 2-year overall survival of Sutent was 95.6%. For valproic acid was 90.7%. So the primary objective of this study was to improve the overall survival at 2 years from 70 to 85%, and so we did meet that primary objective. Okay, and this is the progression-free, this is the relapse-free survival. So at 18 months, 75.6% of patients were relapse-free for sunitinib and 62.8% for valproic acid. And this is dividing that graph. This is the relapse-free survival graph, dividing it up by T stage and also by tumor diameter. So the top 2 lines on both graphs are the lower stages, so T1, T2, and the smaller tumors, and then the larger tumor, so the higher stages, and the larger tumors are on the bottom 2. And as you can see, maybe for the smaller tumors, there's not much of a difference between the 2 drugs. But for the larger tumors, there's a little bit more of a difference. And sorry, I meant to say, this trial was not designed to compare Sutent versus valproic acid, so we can't comment on if one is better, but visually, we can see that there may be a difference. And this is including cohort 2, which is Sutent for 12 months. And so instead of 6 months, if we extend it to 12 months, can we further improve the relapse-free survival, further improve the overall survival? The data is still very early for this cohort, but that's the green line that you can see. It does seem a little bit better than the 6-month cohorts. And cohort 3 is 12 months of combining both Sutent and valproic acid. The study just completed enrollment, and we're waiting for a longer follow-up. Next, I'll talk to you about the adjuvant crizotinib trial. So this was open in Columbia, Mount Sinai, and Ohio State. It has finished enrolling, and they've been presenting some of their data. Their inclusion criteria was class 2 and at least 12 millimeters of diameter. Patients took oral crizotinib, 250 milligrams twice daily for 48 weeks. What is crizotinib? It's another targeted inhibitor, but this one is specific for c-Met, which has been shown to be increased in primary eye tumors and also in liver metastases. So this is their results that they've not published, but they presented at ASCO. You can see the relapse-free survival rates there. And they also looked at their control, so looked at historically how have their patients been doing and compared it to crizotinib. And unfortunately, they did not see a difference between their control arm and their crizotinib arm. Adjuvant low-dose DTIC and interferon was another clinical trial held at Cleveland Clinic. They looked at patients who had monosomy 3 and or 8q amplification. Dacarbazine is a chemotherapy drug given IV, and interferon was also given subcutaneously. So if you look at the graph, the treated arm is the red arm and the black arm is the observed arm. There does look to be a pretty big difference between the 2 arms. But when they went back and adjusted the differences between the groups in terms of age, their size, what they got initially, the survival benefit and that was absorbed, that graph that I showed you, there was no longer a benefit when they corrected for that. So what I'm saying is that the group that got treated, maybe they had smaller tumors to start out with, or they had better prognostic kind of signs. And the last trial I'm going to talk to you about is adjuvant quizzinostat. This is a trial that's going to be open at University of Miami. It has not opened yet because they are having some issues getting the drug, some production issues across the sea. But it will be open. The key inclusion criteria is diameter greater than 12 millimeters and class 2 tumor. And it'll be oral quizzinostat, 12 milligrams on Monday, Wednesday, Friday for 51 weeks. Dr. Lutsky will be running this study. He's hoping to open this study sometime next year once they can get drug. And why are they using quizzinostat? So these are just mouse models, but they showed that in mouse models, quizzinostat, which is an HDAC inhibitor that I had mentioned valproic acid is, that in mouse models it did show shrinkage. And so in conclusion, surveillance recommendations are guided by risk factors, your T-stage, GEP class, mutation, chromosomal abnormalities, and then we do really prefer MRI abdomen if studies. As for adjuvant therapy, we're still looking to find an effective adjuvant therapy for eye melanoma. We need to come to an agreement on what exactly defines a high-risk study so that we can keep it consistent across trials. And the answer to finding the right adjuvant therapy may or may not be found in clues about effective treatments in the metastatic setting. So I know earlier there was a mention about adjuvant tebentafusp. That is a clinical trial that we're trying to, that is in process of being developed, but it is not open yet. And so that is my presentation. So thank you. I can take questions.
Thanks, Kylie, and thank you for your attention. My name is Nigel Deacon. I'm a member of the steering committee for CureOM and the Visions steering committee as well, more recently. I live in Canada. I was diagnosed with ocular melanoma in 2010 and metastasized in March of 2012. And even though I live very far away on the west coast of Canada, I did what a lot of people think of doing, find some world experts quickly. So I came to Philadelphia several times to get my help and my advice. And as you can see, because I'm here talking to you, it worked relatively well. Kim and I are both members of the steering committee, and we're happy to introduce this next panel. We have two experienced social workers from the Sidney Kimmel Cancer Center who will be moderating the session. Greg Garber, who is the Director of Patient Support Services for Supportive Medicine and Cancer Survivorship. Greg, can you wave? And Molly Vecino, who works with ocular melanoma patients and hosts a monthly virtual support group. Molly?
Thank you, Nigel. Thank you, everybody. My name is Kim Roy, and I am also, as Nigel mentioned, a member of the steering committee. Shortly before his 17th birthday, my son Gabriel was diagnosed with ocular melanoma. As a mom, I couldn't just kiss it and make it go away. And so I reached out to Sarah Seelig, and that began my journey as a steering committee member. And Gabe is now 23 years old. He is a biomedical engineer at a local hospital, and he's living his best life. And we are so, so blessed that he continues to be here. Hey, Gabe. Go, Gabe. So it's my pleasure to introduce the rest of the panel. We have two patients and two caregivers who will each share their ocular melanoma story. Linda O'Brien, a primary disease survivor. Oh, I can't find my word, sorry. Sheila Levine, a metastatic disease survivor, and Dan Larkin, who has provided care and support to his wife, Molly, a longtime OM survivor. So thanks so much for being here and sharing your experiences. And we're all here to learn and to bond together as a team to help cure OM. So thank you so much.
Thank you. So we really want this space to be all about you, our panelists. We want to hear about your stories. Talk to us about your journey with OM and where you are now, and if there's any nuggets or words of wisdom you want to share with the group. We just want to give you each some time to talk through your story, and we'll interject as needed to ask for clarification and tackle burning questions. But Dan, would you like to start?
I can start. Hi, I'm Dan Larkin. So this is the second one of these I spoke at. I actually did this 10 years ago, which is really crazy. I'm just in a very different, we're in a very different space than we were 10 years ago. And so it's sort of just, today I'm just reflecting on how different I felt and we felt, I think, then. Some things are still very much the same too. In 2003, my, at that time, fiance, Molly, was diagnosed with OM, and she was treated at Wills. We have the good fortune of living in Philadelphia, so we've been right here, which has been an amazing, amazing stroke of luck to us. I was treated at Wills. Things went pretty well. We got married. I started teaching here in the city. Had 2 kids. Things were good. We just had the annual scans and things were all right. But in 2011, it was found to metastasize in her liver. And it was, it was terrifying. We had 2 very young children. We didn't really know much about it, but we've been, going through this process. We are 45 immunoemolizations, 5 chemoemolizations, I think around a Keytruda, ablation, a bunch of things. We're here. She's doing well. We just had good scan results this week, which is good. And we're, it's been really heartening just to, experience what this community has to offer us here. Just, getting to meet other people who dealt with this. And just throughout the process, just, the amazing staff of people here. We could go on and on about how brilliant all these doctors are. But I guess to me, it's always about the humanity and the kindness. That we see from Dr. Sato, Dr. Gonzalez, Dr. Orloff, everybody across the board, just such amazing people. But I guess I'm trying to calm down a little bit. What I'd like to say, being a caregiver is strange because, and I know I said this last time, if anybody remembers, I don't feel like I do anything sometimes. I feel like I sit and I wait and I drive. And I try to ask questions and answer questions, try to remember things in case Molly didn't answer a question, things like this. But what I think, the best things that we can do as caregivers is, to listen to the needs of the person that we need to take care of, and to advocate for them, to make sure that they know, sometimes they're afraid to advocate for themselves, or they're like worried about something, but they don't want to ask the question, so I'll ask the question at the clinic. And so that's always been a big thing. I guess the other thing is just, how do you deal with this with kids when you have young kids? And I know there's other people here who've done with that. How much do you tell them? How much, you don't want to terrify your children, but you don't want to lie to your children, and you want to involve them in the process. And that's been an evolving thing. If I have any message to people, is that, 10 years ago, I did not think I'd be sitting here. In some way, in very much the same capacity. And that's really been, it's an amazing thing. And I'd like to let people know there's hope. This, but I think I'm good for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. And I'm wondering, for you, what's something that helps you on a hard day as the caregiver when often all the questions are directed at the patient? What's something that helps you?
I don't know, just knowing how she goes through this inspires me every day. I would be much, I don't know, I'd be a wreck all the time. I'm a wreck all the time anyway. That she's able to do this and just, to work and provide for her kids and live a life. And so when I think about what she's going through, I can sort of be like, oh, I can do this. And I mean, the other thing is, I mean, the goal of all this is to make sure we can try to live our lives. But living your lives also helps you get through this. Whether it's, you know, just your everyday things of taking care of your kids, doing your job, watching TV, you know, going on trips, doing fun things, doing routine things, you know, and that's always good. And I think it also just helps to put small things into perspective. And I think, you know, it makes it easier to deal with minor things. You know, you don't have to worry about, if she can deal with that, we can deal with small stuff. And I think that's always been, that's helped me get through these things.
I'd like to add that you're not a wreck, you're a human being, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You got a lot.
Thanks.
Okay.
Let's think about what's going on. You have to excuse me because I've had too many brain surgeries and I don't have a brain anymore, I think. This all happened 14 years ago. My eye surgeon removed my eye and led me to believe I'm done. You know, he took care of the eye and I'm done. And never did any scans, never did any follow-up. And 3 years later, I didn't feel well on a tennis court, and my friends overreacted and sent me off to the hospital, and that's where they found the very beginnings of the metastasis. So I have been coming to Philadelphia for 11 years now. A little closer. I've been coming for 11 years now. I have a list of what's been happening to me while I'm here. I have been on, I think, every treatment, and there's not much more I can say about this other than I'm so thankful for everything here at Philadelphia and for the doctors here at Philadelphia. And if you have any questions, that's sort of why I was here, more for questions and to give you my whole life story. So I'm sorry, I don't have a whole lot to say, but just thankful for being here and for Philadelphia. So.
Hello, everyone. I'm Linda O'Brien. I'm a 14-and-a-half-year patient survivor of ocular melanoma. 14-and-a-half years ago, they didn't have a lot of things that they have today, no tumor testing and I've lost my words, but anyway, more treatment for metastasis, future metastasis. But anybody that knows me, I'm pretty much a rebel. And back when I was diagnosed, at the time I too was engaged like Dan and Molly. And Stephen, my fiance, one day he really got all over me and he said, "You need to take this more seriously." And I said, well, I am taking this pretty seriously, but I'm going to beat this to the finish line. And so that's the way I have lived with this, is staying ahead of it. I did 11.5 years of Avastin injections every 4 months. Never did they get easy for me. It was like tie me into the chair and crank the eye open and they do it. But about 3 years ago, the injections quit working. I went in and I couldn't even see the big E on the chart, so I knew I was in trouble. But that's okay. I'm still living with no evidence of disease. I try to stay very active in the OM community. As Bernadette, when she talked earlier, I think she and I are just about joined at the hip. We put on this annual 5K. I was on the steering committee for the registry, and that was the day that came out. That was just the most fantastic day ever. For new people, it's my advice, yes, it's a shock, but take it a day at a time, and don't look at it as, when is this going to metastasize? Just do what you have to do. Stay with your scans and live your life. At the time when I was diagnosed, I was vice president of management for a multi-million-dollar corporation, and I was with him for 17 years. And about, I don't know, 6-7 years ago, I decided to retire from that job. And I went to work with my family, my husband's family. We were strawberry growers down in Florida, and sold to grocery store. As a matter of fact, up in this area, I don't know how many of you know of Wegmans or Tops, or that we supply them vegetables, and we still do today. And then a year ago, I was kind of bored with that, and once again, remember the rebel in me. I changed my career. At age 67, I became, with one eye, a private investigator. Honest to God. And so that's what I'm doing with my days now. So you can be what you want to be and just stay ahead of it.
I thought about that when we met a couple weeks ago. I thought about that all along.
Yeah, right.
It's, I love irony in career decisions, and
I know,
that's
right?
fantastic. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say thank you. If anyone has questions for our panelists, feel free to join us at the microphone. I want to start by asking Sheila, from where you started and all you've been through, what have you learned about being an advocate for yourself?
For myself, I'm actually trying to live life. I know I have this disease, and I sort of put it on the back burner because I don't want it to be up here that this is what I'm thinking about every day. So, it comes to me periodically, but I just try to live life. The problem is, I can't do a whole lot. For a while there, I was coming to Philadelphia every week, so people would say to me, "Oh, you taking a vacation? Are you going somewhere?" "Yes, I'm going to Philadelphia. What else am I doing?" And I'm still coming here every 3 weeks. So there's, other than living life, I'm not taking vacations. I'm not going anywhere, but I'm still here. My mantra is, I'm still here after 11 years of metastasis. So I'm very thankful, and I'm still healthy enough to, I go to the gym and I do other things, and I'm just thankful for everything.
Okay. Thank you. Have either Dan or Linda come across any moments, or even Sheila, moments where maybe you've had to give pushback to your care team or speak up for yourself during doctor's appointments to feel like you have had, questions that maybe remained unanswered or goals that you've wanted to meet, and how have some of those conversations went? How has it been interacting with your care teams over the years, navigating this?
Well, my care team is sitting right here. And I think he's wonderful.
Yeah.
And he listens to me. It's not a doctor that wants to talk all the time. This is somebody that listens. That as soon as I start talking, he stops. So,
yeah.
And by the way, my husband says hi. Told me to say hi to you personally.
Yeah, our experience with the care team here has just been great. And so, they've been so good at accommodating for us, making sure they don't schedule treatments around, holidays or the start of school. Every time we talk to them, it's always they want to know about us first before they want to know about, medical stuff, which is, it's good. It's really, it makes that part of it so much easier. In terms of our care team around us, family supporting our family's been pretty good. I think we've both been pretty lucky at having employers that are very understanding and flexible with a lot of, with the treatments and things like that, which has been good. I think, and we talked about this in one of the breakout groups a little bit, I think one of the hard things is just people just don't understand exactly what this is. Oh, it's skin cancer. No. Oh, what's her eye? What's her liver? It's her eye. Wait, and then it's just confusing sometimes to have to explain it to people, and that can get tiring. And then, of course, just because people are, and if you're the not understanding of what it means because you look okay, you feel okay, and so that's often trying to explain that. And then, of course, you don't want to be. I mean, I'm generally an optimist. I don't like to dwell on gloom and doom and stuff like this either. But then, you don't also want people to just think nothing's wrong. So there's, and that's. I think as caregivers, I think that's part of what we kind of have to do sometimes is play defense a little bit around people and make sure, sometimes we can take the brunt of that if somebody else doesn't need to. But it's, for the most part, it's hard to, it's weird to use the word lucky or fortunate in the context of this, but I feel like we have been very much so. Just in terms of understanding that we've had and the people we've been able to deal with, or just the fact that we live here. But yeah.
I live down in Florida, so when I was diagnosed with this, I was sent to USF Eye Institute in Tampa to Dr. Peter Pavin. He was any doctor that would walk in doing all the tests and everything, and his response would be, boy, I got that sucker good, made me happy, But Dr. Pavin about 3 years ago retired, and I mean, you talk about going into a tailspin. It was like, oh my gosh, what do I do? Because y'all know we can't just walk in any door and go, hey, I have ocular melanoma, I'm here to see you, can you help, So I ended up actually calling Bernadette when Joe was first diagnosed and found out who he went to see. And it was Florida Retina Associates there in Tampa, so I called and got an appointment. And I think today, I see Dr. Peden there, and I think today they kind of wish I'd never came through their door because I'm telling them. I mean, he doesn't get to say anything. I'm telling him how it goes, but no. They're wonderful there. Actually, they've even gotten involved in our 5K. Of course, that was the first thing out of my mouth at my first appointment, And, but I've always felt confident in my care and attending all these symposiums. I know Dr. Orloff, Dr. Sato, all these people I've met here, I know if something happens, I do know where I need to go. So that is comforting to me. And one note I wanted to say to Dan a while ago about when you said about not being, you really didn't do anything as a caregiver. You don't know what you do as a caregiver, just being there. When your wife, or like my husband, when I'm going through what I'm going through, he stood over me holding my hand every time I got an injection in my eyeball, trying not to throw up and going, I don't know how you do this, but just you being there is more than you'll ever know, helpful.
We have a question. I can't turn around. I'll never come back from
I know, right?
Don't hurt your neck. No, and it was a really good question, and it actually touches on what we were just talking about. For people who are not living close to a major academic center, right? Where they know the disease and they have the experts. What reassurance can be given to someone who is currently being treated in the community setting? And again, I think we sort of touched on that as kind of going beyond and understanding the broader resources like an advocacy group can bring with patient symposia like this and being introduced to experts at many different places across the country.
Exactly. And anybody here who can address that too, please feel free, because I completely get that question, right? It's like Philly is the mecca, but there are so many people out there. This meeting moves around because there are experts in all parts of the country, and so anybody want to talk to that?
And come up and you can use the microphone here.
Can I say a few words?
So obviously we love having all patients come here because we love all of you guys. But the truth is, and Dr. Sato always says this, that, it's his dream that, what we do here can be replicated all over the country so that patients don't need to hop on a plane to get here, or a very long train ride, or drive. And, I think it's hard with a rare cancer because you need an institution and a group of people. As you can see, it's not just one person, it's a group, to really commit themselves to a rare disease. What I think is happening, hopefully, is now with an FDA-approved drug that can be offered, in many places, that we're going to start to see these other little pockets, open up. And even still, even liver-directed therapy, in its many forms, a lot of the treatments that we've done here in Philadelphia, but as we'll talk about this afternoon, there's a lot of them now in clinical trial, that are offered at other sites, that we hope there's going to be other institutions that are going to want to, come to the table in a big way, and see more than just the 1 or 2 patients a year. So I think it's going to happen. Certainly, I think when that happens, we will still commit ourselves here in Philadelphia to being the kind of liaison, meaning that if patients feel like they just need some direction, because I know that's what we do a lot of, and getting people to where they need to go. We'll continue to have our finger on the pulse of where everything's at, but can certainly get patients closer to home. So she's not here today, but certainly for advanced patients, Renee Zielinski, is our gal, for that, and we'll hear you and we'll relay your questions to us. Oh, she is. Oh, Renee is here. There she is. And so I think as more and more places around the country become able to treat uveal melanoma in some capacity, we'll still be here for advice and help.
Thanks, Dr. Orloff. That's helpful.
Yeah, I stopped talking. I keep talking, so I'm sorry. But first of all, I have to mention MRF, and then go multiple other places to increase the awareness of disease, kind of educates the local oncologists or many specialists to be on the same page. I greatly appreciate your effort. Okay. And second thing is, Mr. Trump did a good thing, when COVID-19 is pandemic. He said, okay, doctor can help anybody in this country. We got the privilege of talking to anybody in California, Florida, telehealth. Then there is some political issue, and then they stopped doing that, and we can't do anymore. So that issue, the way to contact us is just ask your doctor to contact us, contact Renee. We are allowed to talk to professional to professional, and then seeing a patient on the internet, and then we have some legal issue and then insurance issue. It's kind of very difficult to do that. So therefore, the best way, if you have any question, ask your doctor to send us email or contact Renee. That's the way. The other thing is MRF, QOM developed a very good website. Just kind of print it out and give it to the doctor. It's not in a polite way. If you think something unknown is done. Okay, so that's not the way. And then eventually, 5 years, we are proposing multi-institutional clinical trials. So therefore, even the trial specialists, not the melanoma specialists, start knowing eye melanoma. So hopefully, 5 years with our joint effort, there should be some underserved area in eye melanoma treatment. So that is my hope. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. And I think, there's so much value in arming ourselves with information, especially when there are so many unanswered questions and unanswerable questions about the course of this disease for any one of us or any one of you. And so I think we also, too, have to find a way to find the balance between seeking out information about what we could need in the future, how that could look, preparing for uncertainty, but also allowing OM to take a back seat when you should be allowed to live your life. And it's sometimes hard to find that balance. And I want to hear what Bernadette has to say, and I want to hear if anyone else has thoughts on how you find that balance. When should OM be in the front? When can it take a back seat? And how to arm yourself with enough information that you feel relatively prepared or in control when there are also so many unanswerable questions. Go ahead.
I was just going to go back to that question that was mentioned, before. I know for us in 2011, our first thought was Moffitt because, and at that time, Moffitt didn't have anything for OM. So we went there talking to a doctor that was really focused more on cutaneous melanoma and trying to kind of navigate that. And then literally, and I think this is important to stress too, is that for everyone to stay connected with our community, because back at the time there was a email group, an OcuMel group, and June Zager honestly wrote to me and said, "Don't walk, run to Philly." I would have never known about Dr. Sato. Would have never even had found that information out. So, and I did. I contacted Renee, and next thing, it was like, boom, there we were in Philadelphia, the weekend of Labor Day of 2011. So I think, too, having other people to hear, to reach out to, we were lost. We were going to go into a trial that really would have not been a good thing. So, and at that time, like Linda, too, 08, you were trying to learn your own. I mean, really, honestly, when we got to Dr. Sato, I felt like I could breathe because I felt like I didn't have to tell him anything, because you were going to places that they didn't know anything about it. So I think also staying connected with the community is really, really critical. It's very, very
the
critical.
curse of the rare cancer, having to know everything as the patient and not necessarily always having a resource that can be a source of authority to you on how you should be handling this.
Yeah, so, so that's how I found Philadelphia. It's how I found Dr. Sato, because of the email group who told me to go. And I remember Joe and I looking up his name, and we're like, okay, and going, because we, read about him. So, I think it's important, definitely important.
Thank you.
For sure. So, thank you.
Thanks.
Oh, did somebody? Oh, wait, 5 minutes. Oh, yeah, okay. I do well with limits. Dan, I just wanted to just quickly touch on something, shifting gears a little bit. The issue of talking to kids, where's the sweet spot? Is something I've spent my entire career kind of thinking about and contemplating and talking to patients and caregivers about. What do you think?
I'm not even sure if I know. Like you said, when it first metastasized, our daughter was just 1 year old. Our son was a little bit older. Now he's 15, she's 12. So it's gone from them just knowing mommy's in the hospital this weekend or this for these days, and then to we have treatment coming up, and you sort of figure it out. And of course, every kid is different too, and you kind of talk to them about it. Don't mince words with the kids, but again, it's just important to be, I think, truthful and honest about what things are, but without trying to scare them, because they don't need to be overburdened with all this information, and there's not a lot they can necessarily do with it. And of course, but also sort of knowing that this could change, right? We've been pretty fortunate in terms of just, we've had series of treatments, but things have been stable-ish. So, but I think it's, again, if they ask questions, you need to answer their questions, and you need to be honest. But I guess you don't necessarily, they don't need to be burdened with things that they don't necessarily understand or aren't necessarily ready to understand. And of course, the reality is, even outside of this, this is true for every parent in every situation anyway. This can, like, I could get hit by a bus tomorrow. I mean, it's so, how do you prepare your kids for this? It's letting them know what's going on, loving them, supporting them, and, answering their questions, I guess.
Thank you. Couple minutes left. Any pearls, anything that you want people to know? Any of you?
Sheila? Anything?
Yeah, any of you. Anybody in the audience? Question?
I was just going to add to what Dan had said, because I have young children too, and mine were 3, 6, and 9 when I was diagnosed. And I agree with everything he said, and I think as adults we tend to over-talk. Like, we speak a lot about it and we want to share everything. But what we need to do is just tell them the facts, but then give them the space to ask questions. Because they'll only ask you as much as they want to know. And so that's kind of been our rule, is I'm never going to lie to you, but at the same token, I don't feel like my kids need to know every last detail, because it is scary. So if they ask me a question, I'm going to answer it. But just giving them the space to ask that question without saying, well, they know it's an incurable disease, they know all those things, but just giving them the space to ask what they want to ask. And sometimes I think too, I'll add that making sure that they have somebody in their life that they can speak to that's not you. Because we have 3, and the oldest and the middle are they definitely go to each other and they ask each other, what do you think? Is mom okay today? Mom had scans. Did mom say anything to you? Do you think she's lying? Do you think she's telling us the truth? So I know that they speak, but making sure that they have that other person in their life that they can speak to that isn't you, because sometimes I think they know that you're going through this, so they don't want to burden you with their thoughts either. So making sure that they have, if it's a counselor, if it's a friend, if it's somebody else that they know that they can speak to, but definitely allowing them that space.
Thank you. Years ago, I went to a conference. There's a group at Mass General Hospital that studies how to talk to kids, essentially, how to help families with illness. And one of the things that I still remember from that conference is saying to your kids, don't worry alone, right? If there's something on your mind, don't worry alone, which has stuck with me to this day. It's kind of simple, but effective, right?
Plus, I think the secret and mystery is that these tips don't end with children, adult children too. I mean, that protective instinct as a parent to want to shield your child from the evils of the world, that doesn't end when your kid turns 18 or when they turn 30 or 40. There's always that desire to want to keep them from being exposed to the difficulties of the world unnecessarily. And so I think it's something good to think about too, about how you talk with your adult children about all of this. And are you keeping things from them that at a certain point they should and need to know about your journey, so that you can let them in and be vulnerable with them and give support in a way that's helpful with each other. So definitely, those instincts don't go away when your kid grows up. Any other questions that have come in?
There's just a couple comments, and again, a lot of this is about, the comment from Chadwick is really about them being the patient and educating their network. And I would just say, again, to go back to what Dr. Sato said, at the MRF, we have a lot of OM resources that patients take to their local physicians and to those offices. And I would say that never underestimate the power of the patient to educate, and to educate the medical community, and to educate them about the centers of excellence. We have a treatment center finder on our website, melanoma.org, where we indicate the ocular melanoma centers of excellence. And all the physicians here today, you heard them say, they will make referrals, they will make those introductions, they will help you. So again, please use the resources that are available and advocate in the communities if you don't have a center to help educate the medical community there. So With that, let's thank the panel one more time. I now have the distinct pleasure of introducing our final speaker, Dr. Takami Sato. As many of you know him personally, but many of our virtual attendees don't, he is the director of the Metastatic Uveal Melanoma program here at Thomas Jefferson. Dr. Sato heads one of the few programs in the United States treating melanoma originating in the eye. Dr. Sato has devoted his entire career to improving the understanding of this disease and developing new treatments, particularly for patients who are not eligible for surgery. Dr. Sato was awarded the CureOM Vision of Hope Award in 2016 at our Philadelphia Gala. And again, you can view his entire bio in our program. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Sato.
Thank you very much for kind introduction. And I'm the oldest in this group, so therefore, I probably have to talk about history of uveal melanoma treatment before I cannot speak anymore. So how can I put this one? And just kind of, summary of the eye melanoma. Eye melanoma is, uveal melanoma is most common primary eye malignancy in adult. So this comes from the melanocyte in the choroid, ciliary body, and eye, so-called uveal tract. Most commonly seen is choroidal melanoma. It's a very rare tumor, depending on statistics, but 5 to 7 patients per million, and we see total 2,000 to 2,500 every year. And dominantly Caucasian disease, and only 5% of the cutaneous melanoma. Age peak is in their 60s. Total survival rate, depending on the statistics or data, but 50 to 80%. So interestingly, liver is the most dominant site of metastasis, and then most patients, if develop metastasis, they tend to die from the liver tumor metastasis. So, long time ago, some of them in this room may not be born yet, but that age, local control of the primary uveal melanoma is the main issue, as Carol talked a little bit. So up until 1978, the only option was taking eye out. So no choice. If you have a vision or not, there's no other treatment. Then interesting story was given. Dr. Zimmerman and the others say, compared to natural, so-called natural history of melanoma, patients who receive enucleation tend to live shorter. All right, so enucleation, touching the eye, may be pushing a cell out from the eye to go to the systemic circulation and then facilitate systemic spread. So that, every surprise, and then there's a couple of clinical trials to investigate on that. There's very important clinical trial has been done by the group called the COMS. The two trials, one, large tumor, if pushing a tumor in the eye is causing spread, why don't you radiate and then kill them first? So this was done for the large tumor compared to just take eye out. So this result showed no change. So therefore, radiation before enucleation doesn't have any benefit. And the second trial that Sarah mentioned, how about smaller tumor, medium-sized tumor, which has been removed, but some of the patients had good eyesight. So why don't you randomize patient into the radiation compared to enucleation? Interestingly, 10 years after enrollment, survival is the same. So I mean, touching the eye, it may not be the major reason for the spread. That's kind of general consensus, but at the same time, practice change, because if you have no difference between enucleation and then taking radiation, why don't you do the radiation to keep the eye as long as possible? So that's kind of new journey of the eye oncologist to try to keep the eye vision as long as possible. So basically, after this COMS trial, radioactive plaque treatment becomes standard of care. Then this is a different kind of hypothesis proposed by the Dr. Eskelin in Finland. actually tumor is already out when you have a diagnosis. If a patient who eventually have metastasis, tumor is already out. So actually, based on the out of data, calculation of the doubling time, they think that one tumor in the eye started more than 10 years before diagnosis. And then doubling. And then roughly 3 years before actual diagnosis, they start spreading out. At the beginning, no tumor, and then the time of the metastasis, roughly 3 years after 2 years after diagnosis. So therefore, the prevention is not actually the right term. It is a kind of treatment of subclinical metastasis in the patient who has potential risk. So that's kind of concept. I think this is better than touching eye, pushing a tumor cell out. So this is kind of a way of thinking how to design adjuvant treatment. Then Wills Eye Hospital is the center of the treatment. Dr. Shield, established the center for this treatment oncology service in 1974. And Dr. Carol Shield joined roughly 10 years later, and they, love each other and then get married, and then very productive. Carol is not listening. Huh? Very productive life, not only privately but also publicly. Okay. So now they are seeing 300, 400 cases. Wills Eye Hospital is a international center for the eye treatment. This is kind of a secret, And this is a young Jerry, young Carol in the OR around time of 1988. So it's more than almost like 35 years ago. They are still active. Jerry is a little bit, retired these days, but Carol is still very active. And they just keep helping patients, radiating, sometimes integrating, and then still seeing a patient. I joined Jefferson in 1991. And my mission is how to improve the systemic recurrence. So there's nothing available, basically. Chemotherapy for skin melanoma doesn't work for eye melanoma, so therefore we just kind of focus on liver-directed treatment. So this is a paper published from MD Anderson Cancer Center. They presented how efficacious their treatment were. And actually you see the response rate like 2% maximum, 8% maximum. Basically, system chemotherapy for skin melanoma that had not worked. So what we should do? So we are dealing with this every day. Okay, interestingly, tumor grows more rapidly in the liver, so therefore, if we could stop the growth in the liver, patients tend to potentially survive longer. So that's our concept, hypothesis. So, we just kind of use the liver-directed treatment through the hepatic artery because tumor tend to have a blood supply from the hepatic artery. On the other hand, normal liver has a blood supply from portal vein, another blood vessel to the liver. So therefore, if we give medicine or some treatment to the hepatic artery, we can preferentially attack on the cancer rather than damaging normal liver. That's the concept of liver-directed treatment. So, and then delivery of medicine to the liver directly decrease systemic exposure of the medicine. So that prevent the side effect. So that, again, started from MD Anderson. MD Anderson published very interesting paper, an excellent paper in JAMA saying that chemoembolization of hepatic metastasis through the hepatic artery result in excellent response. They use cisplatinum, this is one of chemotherapy medicine, and they use a polyvinyl sponge that is permanent occlusive. Giving a medicine stop the blood flow. So response rate is 46%. Compared to 8% single digit, we think that's this is a miracle. And then after joining Dr. Mastrangelo, my mentor, still my colleague, say, try this. Then I tried this, and with CVIR, and then our result is miserable. So in medicine, platinum, it doesn't stay in the liver. They just quickly pass through the liver, and then we don't get the response. So therefore, I think we should change it approach, and then we discuss a lot, and then we finally select the medicine called BCNU. this is very old medicine also. It's chemotherapy medicine, skin melanoma. But one of the interesting characteristics of this medicine is oil soluble. Doesn't go to mix up with water is not good. But put that into the oil, like oily contrast, just melt away in 1 second. So therefore, we can use this medicine in the oil compound, inject to the hepatic artery, and then medicine tend to stay in the liver with the oil for a long time and then release slowly. And then we decide to use a temporary this occlusive gelatin sponge particle instead of the polyvinyl sponge because we can use the same artery again, like somebody say 40 times. So that's kind of our idea. And then systemic side effect of BCNU is bone marrow toxicity, and then we doesn't want to see it, so therefore we decide to do that. So all kind of discussion is underway, but Dr. Masanjo said, don't talk anymore, do it. So we start doing it with Dr. Kevin Sullivan. He's also very creative, so he's very collaborative. So therefore, first patient was treated on January 31st, 1995, 27 years ago. And then since that time, we have kept doing that. But at the beginning, we were all afraid of the toxicity, so that we only use a 100 milligram BCNU. Now we are using a 300 milligrams. So that's showed a much better response, and the clinical trial has been ongoing right now. Then what happened? Liver control is achieved in 2/3 of patients at least for several months, and then patient developed the systemic recurrence. Because this is from eye to the liver, there may be something in the lymph node, bone, lung, and then how we can address that. So therefore, then Masanjo said, do something. And then we decide to choose the medicine, which is not chemotherapy medicine, so-called immunostimulant. So at the time, only 3 medicines available: GM-CSF, IL-2, interferon alpha, which is the best. So based on the different cancer vaccine experiment, we decided to choose the GM-CSF, granulocyte macrophage colony stimulating factor, kill the cancer cell by stopping the blood flow, and then inject the medicine immunostimulant before killing it to stimulate local immune reaction, and then hopefully systemic immune reaction can develop, so-called in situ cancer vaccine. So, okay, and then just click one more time. Okay, the catheter goes through the femoral on the left side artery, and then go to the liver, and then catheter is coming here, tube, go into hepatic artery, inject the medicine with thiazole, and then block the artery by embolic agents, and then tumor get inflamed. Then stimulates dendritic cell, macrophage in that area, start eating antigen, and these cells are smart to go to the lymph node to educate immune system, a T cell, and then we're hoping that these T cells can eventually take care of the local liver tumor, but also go to the system. So this is the first time this slide worked well. Okay, thank you. So I hope you understand that. So, but FDA, didn't give us a good time, easy time, and they say this is intra-arterial infusion, so therefore you have to go from very small dose. The standard dose for the injection is like 250, 500 microgram. So we are asked to start from 25 microgram. It's a very small dose, so therefore we negotiate patient, if tolerate, okay, 25, go to 50, 125, and then just can do that for the phase 1. Interestingly, after the 1,000 microgram dose reached, we start seeing the difference in systemic progression delay. So the first treatment was given February 25th, 2000. So this is more than 22 years ago treatment. We are still doing it. So because patient is getting a treatment benefit. And then Dr. Olof is aggressively using this, combining with other approaches, and then she's working on the new clinical trial. So this also we are working on the new medicine, immunostimulant. Instead of GM-CSF, we can do something different. but again, that's kind of, our history for the development of new liver-directed treatments. And after that, we went through the many different approaches: embolization, chemoembolization, immunoembolization, drug-eluting views, and radiation beads. This is going to discuss this afternoon with the interventional radiation radiology group. And then we participate in IHP, their case study, and then Dr. Adamo killing tumor by microwave for the small tumor, and then we have very good tumor control, and then focused radiation has been done for the area that the microwave cannot be done, but we don't do the surgical resection frequently compared to European people because most of the time tumor is multiple, and we cannot control the tumor. But for the very rare occasion, if only one tumor and very long time from primary eye melanoma, we try to cut it out, especially if it is easy, like left row. And then if we start having TIL therapy that Dr. Olof is going to lead sometime soon, probably we might do that for the purpose of making attacking cell. Okay, and then we used to use that for the cancer vaccine. So there should be some additional reason to do the more surgery. So Dr. Cedar summarized all kind of data that we have. This is all patients who have liver-directed treatment or system chemotherapy here at Jefferson. Cohort 1 is before my time, all chemotherapy is only an option. Cohort 2 that I just mentioned is the liver-directed treatment started, and then cohort 3 we start doing more systemic combination or following the new systemic treatment. So then again, median survival was 5.3 months. That was everywhere in the literature in that age, and then now we see the more than a year and a half, and then close to 2 years, and then 3 times, 4 times increase in survival. But I got a lot of message from patients. Dr. Sato, 2 years too short. So our goal is now next step is going to be everybody living more than 3 years to 5 years. So that's before going to the cure, So, but we are working on that. So then next one. This is a new era, and then I have a very lucky part-time that we have a very good fellow. Some reason fellow interested in going to do this, and Dr. Olof decided to come join us. There's a bunch of kind of new treatments, so development of new systemic treatment. Liver treatment, we are kind of satisfied, not totally satisfied, but the control rate is like 60%. So have to go to 100%, but we are suffering from systemic progression. So, year 2010, it's a very good time. There's a discovery of the mutation in G coupling protein receptor, GNAQ, GNA11. That opened the era of the multiple different approaches. The driver mutation is kind of top of the receptor, and then keeps sending a signal downstream. GNAQ, GNA11 mutation, and the very rare case CCLTR2, PLC beta 4. Then later, another mutation found. So that changed the behavior of the cancer cell, as Dr. Cedar mentioned. EIF1AX mutation, some reason that predict the better prognosis. We don't see the metastasis in general. On the other hand, BAP1 mutation, which predict early time phase metastasis, and tumors that tend to be aggressive. And SF3BR mutation, interestingly, that predict the late recurrence, also recurrence in the different organ like the lung. So we start seeing an inside of cell better for this period of time, and then recently PRAME expression is considered to be a poor prognostic factor for many reasons. Okay. So this has been known, survival of patient is 2 phases. One is within 5 years, first peak, and second peak is after 5 to 10 years. Now this is explained by the molecular characteristic of tumor cell. If the tumor has BAP1 mutation, tend to develop metastasis early, a couple years after diagnosis, and then if the tumor has SF3BR mutation, not only early metastasis, but metastasis tend to develop like 10 years, 15 years. So therefore, this type of patient, we have to keep watching very carefully forever. And then, yeah. You know, you hear a lot of things about BAP1, and then this is difficult to explain in one slide. So it's a multiple functional protein, and then mainly, you know, like a transcription of DNA to RNA, RNA to protein, sometimes DNA repair. So therefore, attacking on this medicine, mutation is very challenging. And then this gene is located in chromosome 3p21, so that means monosomy 3. Why it is bad? Because one chromosome is gone, another chromosome has this mutation. So therefore, there's no function of BAP1. So there are a lot of approaches like HDAC inhibitor, and BET inhibitor, EZH2 inhibitor, and now we're doing FHD286 in our clinic. And PARP inhibitor, this is still very preliminary, and then hopefully one of them showed some growth, stop the growth. And the SF3B1 is basically translation of DNA into RNA. It's kind of not dysfunctional, so therefore they, tumor tend to develop, make a very strange abnormal proteins. So that we call it neoantigens. So potentially immune system may see this better. So the medicine so-called PRMT5 inhibitor has been done, but again, we don't have any final result of this. So this is a quite different mutation which make a different characteristic tumor. So Dr. Sida is going to discuss this again this afternoon. But basically, there are many different approaches. This medicine which is circled with red is targeting, driver mutation or subsequent signal pathway. And the blue one is so-called BAP1, mutation approach. Actually, Dr. Aprin, group is kind of very active in doing many other things regarding this epigenetic modification. So hopefully we can get the better medicine to slow down the growth or make the tumor cell behave better. The SF3B1 mutation attacking is also ongoing. So this is kind of quite different from 10 years ago. 10 years ago, nothing available. So again, which is winner, we don't know yet, but I have a little bit more bias toward this medicine. This is a PKC inhibitor, ID196. So this is kind of just downstream of G protein abnormality, and then interestingly, single agents actually stopped the growth of the tumor in 60% patients. So, of course, medicine has a side effect, but the company is trying to find a partner to enhance or further increase the efficacy of this medicine. And then currently, a most promising approach is combination of ID196 PKC inhibitor with medicine called crizotinib. I think adjuvant trial, mentioned a little bit. That is a MET, New York MET, MET inhibitor. Issue is, HGF, hepatocyte growth factor, is rescuing the efficacy, causing a resistance to the PKC, inhibitor. So by the middle figure, and then PKC stopped the signal downstream MAP kinase pathway and such. But if tumor is in the liver, and then HGF is produced, that blocks the, rescue these signaling pathways. So then they combine both. So hopefully this is one of the next approved medicine from FDA. I think this is very promising result. So hopefully, we're going to have a phase 2, phase 3 sometime soon. So in terms of the immunotherapy, and as of today, nothing works except for the tebentafusp. Ipi/nivo is very disappointing. And then this fusion protein concept is very interesting, but we're going to talk a little bit. And adaptive T-cell therapy, like a TIL therapy, it's good for the skin. There is some efficacy in the eye melanoma, but it's not good as skin. So numerous immune checkpoint blockade it has been tried. So basically, interestingly, like a category 4 or group 4, very aggressive tumor, there are tons of immune reaction in the eye tumor. So most likely it's a phase of the equilibrium or escape phase, and then even though tumor cell is surrounded by a lot of immune cell, they are kind of beating up, these cells. Once the tumor cells out, and they're nothing. Basically, so-called immunotolerance or immune desert, exclusion. There's no expression of the PD-L1, IDO1, which is related to interferon gamma signaling. And then very few T cells, M2 macrophage dominant. So therefore, stimulating immune system by giving some medicine is probably very, remote in terms of the efficacy. All right, then, in addition to that, liver is very nasty microenvironment for the immune cell. Actually, TDO, one of the enzymes, produce kind of kinrenin, which cause the death of the T cell, and then a lot of kind of macrophage producing tons of cytokine to suppress the immune cell. So it's not a good microenvironment to just give a medicine. So this kind of immunocore, I respect them a lot. They create the concept. Why don't you bring a cell into the tumor? Nothing about any kind of immune microenvironment modifier, just bring a cell into the tumor. So that's a concept for treatment for eye melanoma. They created, fusion protein. Dr. Olof and others are going to talk. I'm not going to tell too much. But basically, in the immune desert, by using this medicine, we can bring the cell into the cancer. So that's the kind of way to go, and then a concept that is proven to be efficacious. So Tebentafs showed the survival benefit. Then we are working on the next generation, that is PRAME. As you know, PRAME is expressed in aggressive tumor, and then PRAME is more tumor-specific. So therefore, heavy skin reaction, hypotension, but PRAME is supposed to be less toxic because this is tumor-specific. This currently phase 1. We went on to 320 microgram. We think it's kind of too much. So maybe less than that, 240 something is going to move on to the clinical trial, especially for skin melanoma and other type of cancer. And the eye melanoma, I kind of keep asking, and I don't know what kind of a cohort is going to open, but hopefully there is a cohort to work for that. The other thing, Dr. Abril and myself working very closely, and why liver? Liver tropism, I think that this might be, we call it the word niche, this is why this liver, out of kind of growth factor and the chemokine receptor. So still, it's kind of question, how, tumor cells stay dormant for 10 years, all of a sudden start waking up and start. So if we know the mechanism better, potentially we can stop the growth. If the cancer cell doesn't grow, it's like a hypertension. So you can live forever. So that's kind of goal. And then now the other thing that's kind of complaint from everybody who has HLA2 negative, what we should do. Of course, we continue the clinical trial, and then, Dr. Olof is going to start here therapy for the eye melanoma, hopefully with some modification. I think that 10% response rate is not so attractive, so we have to modify cells. And then she's also thinking of injection of NK cell to the liver. NK cell is another cell type to kill the cancer cell. So hopefully this is some breakthrough. And then including immunocore, companies start working non-HLA2 like a patient. So hopefully we can see different type of bispecific antibody or T-cell infusion, T-cell engager. All right. So I have seen many patients. I lost many patients, but like today, patient come here, talk to me and thank you, and I encourage the oncologist. So I saw this patient year 2000. She was found to have a pigment lesion 7 weeks of pregnancy. And then she come to Hillside and then have a radioactive plaque treatment, 7 months of pregnancy. Then come to talk to me. Dr. Sato, should I keep doing it? And should I give up? And then based on the so-called risk management assessment, and then I say, it's your choice, but I think it is safe to deliver a kid. And then just keep doing the same thing, every 6 months MRI, and then 5 years later, she contacted me again. Dr. Sato, I'm happy to be alive. I want to have a second baby. All right, risk is decreased more than 2/3, and then but still not zero. It's your option, talking to your husband is very nice, and they decide to have a second baby. And I recently met this patient, actually second son, next time, give me a letter. That actually gave me a lot of encouragement. You know, it's a very tough job, but hopefully we can just work with patients and then go through with everybody, and then hopefully we can just keep this disease going away. All right. So this is a message from our team. Thank you, a little bit late, but we have a very good team here, including Dr. Brin lab and my lab, and the clinical team is excellent. CVR team come this afternoon to talk. Medical oncology team, and then most importantly, navigator. And then, actually, I'm sorry, I have to apologize. This is old slide, and then Dr. Shield group is in the center. So, Dr. Shield's, help and then collaboration is greatly appreciated. Thank you very much. That's it.